Welcome to Late Night Story. When the world goes silent and shadows stretch longer, some stories awaken, whispered only to those still awake. So put on your headphones, turn down the lights, and let me guide you through the quiet hours. If you're listening alone, you're exactly where you need to be. If everyone can leave a comment to let me know where you are listening from in the world, don't forget to subscribe before you drift too far into the dark.
Story 1. We were deployed to a secret government lab after containment breach. What they were making down there should never have existed. I can still smell the iron in the air. Blood has a way of clinging to your lungs, even when it's not yours. I'm writing this because I don't know if I'll make it out of the woods alive. If anyone reads this, know that I didn't run. I fought. God knows I tried. We were a 5-man squad. Commander Coleman, Torres, Fields, Matthews, and me. The call came in at 0300. An SOS from Helix Ion Labs. Containment breach. Multiple casualties. Then static. HQ tried for hours to re-establish contact. Nothing but dead air. Coleman said it was probably a comms failure. I wish he'd been right. Helix Scion wasn't some civilian facility. It was government funded, buried under 50 feet of reinforced concrete in the middle of nowhere. Genetic research, experimental evolution, stuff that was supposed to be decades away. I'd heard the rumors. Gene-spliced animals, human-animal hybrids. Soldiers built to survive anything. I thought it was sci-fi nonsense. We touched down in a helicopter just outside the facility at dawn. The fog clung to the tree-line like smoke. The main gate was open, one of the steel doors bent outward, as if something huge had pushed through. Coleman didn't say a word. He just motioned for us to move in. Inside, the power was down. Emergency lights bathed everything in a red glow. There was no sound except for the soft hum of our gear and the occasional hiss of steam from broken pipes. The deeper we went, the worse the smell got. Burnt flesh, blood, and rot. We found the first body near reception. A scientist, half his torso missing. His ribs were snapped outward like a blooming flower. His inside scattered across the floor. Blood smeared across the walls spelled one word: run. Matthews muttered that it had to be an animal attack. Coleman snapped back. No animal does this. Stay alert. We swept through the East Hall, bullet casings, scorch marks, shredded lab coats. In one corner, a body was half fused into the wall. Flesh and concrete blended seamlessly, like they'd been made of the same substance. The elevators were twisted wrecks. So we took the maintenance stairs down to sublevel 3, genetics division. Every step echoed. My heart felt like it was trying to claw its way out of my chest. Then we heard it. A scraping sound, metal on concrete. Field swung his light down the corridor. For a second, I saw movement. Something pale, too fast to focus on. Coleman ordered a sweep. The sound stopped. We found another body, or what was left of one. The bones were soft, bent at impossible angles. The skin was melting off like candle wax. Torres gagged. Then we heard breathing behind us. It ducked under the doorframe as it entered. Its skin was translucent, pulsing faintly with veins of light. Its jaw hung, unhinged, teeth black and needle-thin. But its eyes, Christ, those eyes were aware. Coleman fired first. It moved faster than anything I've ever seen. It was on Fields before we could blink, tearing into him with claws like bone shards. The sound it made wasn't a roar. It was laughter, distorted, mechanical. We opened fire. Bullets tore through it, but it didn't fall. It screamed, a high-pitched shriek that made my vision blur. When it finally retreated into the vents, Fields was gone. All that was left was a pool of shredded flesh and blood. In the control room, Coleman pulled up the logs. Most were corrupted. One still worked, a video feed from a containment cell. A man was strapped to a table, screaming. His skin split open like a cocoon, and something crawled out. Something like the thing that killed Fields. The file name, Subject 47B, Regeneration Trial. We didn't speak for a long time. Torres wanted to abort. Coleman refused. We find survivors, he said. That's the mission. On sublevel 4, the air was thick with mist. The walls looked organic, like we were walking through a throat. Matthews was leading when something dropped from the ceiling. Smaller this time, spider-like, but with a human face and its mouth sewn shut. It crawled on all fours, bones cracking with each movement. Matthews panicked and fired. The muzzle flash lit up a dozen more shapes, clinging to the walls. We ran. They chased us, screeching. One latched onto Torres's leg. I turned and fired point blank, blowing half off him. But its tendrils were already burrowing into his skin. He screamed until his voice became a gurgle. They swarmed him, their tendrils writhing under his flesh, hollowing him out. When they finished, they dragged what was left of him up the wall, using him like an egg sac. We sealed off sublevel 4 and caught our breath. Matthews' tracker picked up faint readings, multiple signals moving slowly, erratically. Could be survivors, I said, my voice cracking. Doubt it, he replied. No one could have survived this. Coleman sighed. He's right, but we check anyway. The signal led us to a chamber lined with hanging cables and broken speakers. The air was hot and wet, reeking of decay. Then came the sound, faint at first, then rising. Singing, a soft, lilting melody, out of tune but hauntingly familiar. A lullaby. Matthews froze. Is that? He started but stopped. The look on his face said he was hearing something else entirely. The music swelled. The cables began to sway, first gently, then violently, jerking in rhythm with the song. Something wet splattered on Matthews' shoulder. He looked up and froze. The ceiling wasn't cables. It was flesh, dozens, maybe hundreds, of human mouths embedded in the surface, lips cracked and twitching, teeth clicking in perfect harmony. Some mouthed silent words. Others sang in fractured tones. Their tongues stretched downward, questing through the air. Jesus Christ, I whispered. Then they screamed. All of them. The sound inverted like suction turned inside out. Matthews opened fire. Blood, or something like it, rained down in sheets, sizzling as it hit the floor. But the mouths didn't stop. They formed words that didn't belong to any language. A tongue lashed down, wrapping around Matthews' throat. He clawed at it, eyes bulging. I grabbed his legs and pulled. The tongue tore loose, but so did half his throat. He died in my arms. The mouse laughed. Coleman hurled an incendiary grenade. Fire consumed the ceiling, flesh popping like oil. The singing stopped, replaced by shrieks fading into silence. When the smoke cleared, only Coleman and I were left. In the security wing, the power flickered back on, just long enough to reveal what was inside the cells. Not people, not animals. Things caught mid-transformation. A child with reversed limbs. A faceless thing with rows of teeth spiraling down its neck. The glass was cracked. That's when I realized these weren't test subjects. They were soldiers. Failed prototypes. Helix Scion wasn't trying to cure disease. They were trying to build evolution itself. And they succeeded. Coleman made the call. We end this here. No survivors. No evidence. We found the generator room. He planted the charges. I covered the door. Then I heard breathing from above. It dropped down on Coleman, pinning him. It was different this time. Bigger, more complete, like the others had been prototypes. And this was the final product. Its body was a patchwork of people, stitched together perfectly. Its mouth opened vertically, splitting its head in half. Coleman screamed for me to run. I hesitated. God help me, I hesitated. That's an order, Martinez. Run. Use the tunnel. Code 8593. Now, go. Then it tore him apart. I fired until my rifle clicked empty. It didn't flinch. It just stared and spoke, not in words, in voices. Coleman, Torres, Fields, and Matthews, all screaming from its mouth at once. I ran. Coleman's screams followed me, twisting into gurgles and a wet crack. I don't remember the keypad, or the tunnel, only the trapdoor and the woods. The fog was thicker now. The air hummed like the earth itself was alive. Things moved in the trees. Then the charges went off. The ground shook. Helix Scion collapsing on itself. A plume of black smoke rose into the dawn, but as I watched from the ridge, I saw shapes crawling out of rubble. Dozens, maybe hundreds. It's been 3 hours. My radio's dead, and my phone is about to die. Can't make any calls, so hopefully this somehow makes it out. The forest is silent again, too silent. If anyone reads this, don't send another team. Don't send anyone. Barricade your homes. Pray if you still believe, because those abominations are free now, and they're hunting. Story 2. My family visits a cabin by the lake every summer, but my uncle warned me never to go in the fall. Series. I didn't grow up thinking there was anything strange about the cabin. It was just one of those places families own for no real reason, a leftover from some distant relative who died before I was born. We only went up in the summers, usually for a weekend or two, and even then the adults acted like the place was more trouble than it was worth. My dad always complained about the road washing out and the plumbing freezing every winter, and my mom said the lake was too cold to bother swimming in. I assumed they just didn't like nature much, or maybe they were tired of the maintenance, because every September they packed everything up with the silent tension that felt out of place in the fresh air. They always left by the first week of the month. No exceptions. As a kid, I thought it was just because school started, but even then my parents seemed more anxious than busy, like the calendar itself was turning into something with teeth. The cabin sat on the north side of the lake closest to our house. I'm keeping the name of the lake off this post, hidden behind a curtain of pines that swallowed most of the light. The water there was darker than the rest of the lake, almost black even on sunny days, and colder than any fresh water I'd ever stepped in. Even in July, it carried this deep chill that surprised me every time I let it touch my ankles. My dad used to joke that the lake was fed by the world's oldest refrigerator, but he never laughed after saying it. He'd just check his watch and tell me to stay where he could see me, which annoyed me back then because there was never anything around. The place was too remote for other families, too uncomfortable for tourists, and too quiet for anyone who didn't grow up loving silence. My uncle used to come with us when I was young, before he stopped showing up. He wasn't really the fun kind of uncle who brought gifts or played games, but he was the type of adult who made the world feel bigger. He had this way of looking out over the lake, like he was waiting for something. And even when I didn't understand it, I could tell he saw more than the rest of us. He taught me how to tie fishing knots and how to read the weather by watching the tree lean. And he always walked down the water at dusk, no matter how tired he was. I followed him a few times, but he never let me go past the first few planks of the dock. He'd stand at the edge staring into the water for a long time, then walk back without saying what he saw. I didn't notice he was slipping out of our lives until one year. He simply didn't come to the cabin with us. My dad said he was busy with work. The next year, he said he'd moved away. After that, my parents didn't say much at all. I didn't think about him for a long time. Life has a way of pushing old memories into the part of your mind that feels like a dream you half remember. I went to school, started working, moved out, and only visited my parents when I had to. The cabin started coming up less and less, and I hadn't been there since I was 15. The whole place faded into nostalgia until last month, when I stopped by my parents' house to borrow a toolbox and found something jammed behind the spare tire in the garage. It was a beaten-up leather notebook with a cracked spine and dirt embedded into the creases, the kind of thing someone carries everywhere for years. There was no name on the cover, but I knew it belonged to my uncle the moment I picked it up, the way he wrote his dates. Tiny numbers in the upper right corner showed up on the first page. The first entry was from 12 years ago. Though the paper looked much older, the entries started out normal. Notes about the weather, observations about the trees, complaints about mice chewing through pantry boxes. There were sketches of the cabin floor plan and measurements written along the walls, which struck me as strange because he'd never mentioned doing repairs up there. But the entries took a turn somewhere around the second week of September that same year. His handwriting got tighter. The lines more cramped, like he didn't want to spill ink outside the margins. He wrote about hearing noises under the cabin at night. Soft dragging sounds like something heavy was being pulled across the dirt. He described finding wet footprints on the porch before dawn. Footprints, he insisted, weren't human. By the fourth week, the entries were just short fragments that looked more like warnings than journal entries. Fog rolled in too early tonight. Don't stay past sundown. Something brushed the dock again. Don't come here after September. It knows our blood. The last entry stopped mid-sentence. It was dated October 3rd, exactly 12 years ago. It came back up through the water tonight. I think it saw me this time. I think. The pen dug into the page, leaving an indent that trailed off into nothing. I must have read the journal 3 times before the sun even set that night. Each time it chipped away at the version of my uncle I remembered, replacing the calm man with a stranger I didn't recognize. I didn't tell my parents what I found because I knew they'd take it away from me, and I couldn't explain why, but I felt like losing that journal would be worse than anything I find inside it. I barely slept that night, and when I did, my dreams were filled with cold water and something shifting beneath it. By morning, I had already made up my mind. I took the journal, packed a bag, and got in my car. I told myself I was going up to the cabin because I needed closure, because I wanted answers about a man I hadn't seen in years. But the truth was simpler. Something was wrong up there, and I couldn't shake the feeling that if I didn't go now, I'd never understand why my family abandoned that place every fall or why my uncle kept going back. I drove most of the day, taking the familiar roads I hadn't seen since I was a teenager. The trees grew thicker the deeper I went, their branches knitting together overhead until the sunlight broke apart into thin beams that followed the car like searching fingers. I didn't realize how isolated the area was until I checked my phone and saw there hadn't been service for nearly 20 miles. The cabin appeared over a rise in the dirt road, looking smaller and older than I remembered. The wood was gray and the roof sagged slightly at one corner, but the windows were intact and the front steps didn't look rotten. I parked beside the old stump where my uncle used to chop firewood and got out slowly, expecting the air to feel crisp or familiar. Instead, it carried an unexpected chill that clung to my skin even though it was still early fall. The trees seemed too still, like they were listening, and the lake behind the cabin was silent in a way that felt deliberate. I walked toward the porch with the uneasy feeling that something had been waiting for me. As soon as I stepped onto the wood, I knew someone had been there recently. The boards were damp, not from rain, but from something dripping. A faint trail of wetness led from the corner of the porch toward the door, dry into pale streaks that looked too narrow to be footprints, but too erratic to be anything natural. The door wasn't locked. When I pushed it open, the hinges gave a quiet groan that echoed a little too long in the still air. Inside, the cabin smelled faintly of smoke and old cedar. Dust coated most surfaces, but not evenly. Someone had cleared off the table in the center of the room, where a lantern sat beside a stack of folded blankets. A mug with dark residue dried at the bottom sat beside the sink, as if someone had sipped from it not long ago. The sight unsettled me in a way I couldn't explain. The place should have felt comforting after so many years, but instead it gave the impression of a house holding its breath. I set my bag down and walked through each room slowly, trying to find some sign of my uncle. The bedroom looked untouched except for the bedspread, which had been pulled back as if someone had slept there recently. In the bathroom, a towel with faded stripes hung over the door, still slightly damp. The only room that looked exactly the way I remember was the small storage closet near the back, where my dad kept tools and fishing equipment. Everything else felt recently lived in, except no one should have been here. When I stepped back into the main room, I noticed something I'd missed before. On the floor near the wood stove, faint shapes had been drawn onto floorboards in a dull gray material. The markings were circular and interlocking, almost like runes but more chaotic, as if someone had tried to copy something they barely understood. They covered a small section of the floor, almost like a boundary or seal. I knelt to get a closer look and saw that the material was ash mixed with something darker. There were smudges near the edges, like the person who drew them had done in a hurry or with shaking hands. I reached out to touch the markings, but a sudden creak behind me made me pull back sharply. I turned, expecting an animal or maybe a loose board settling under its own weight. Instead, a shape stood in the doorway, tall, thinner than I remembered, shoulders slightly hunched. For a moment, I couldn't move. The lantern on the table cast just enough light to reveal the outline of a man, his hair longer and streaked with gray, his clothes clinging to him like he'd stepped out of water. He stared at me with eyes that looked too tired to be surprised. My uncle said my name like he wasn't sure it was real. For a second, I thought I was dreaming him into place, dragging an old memory into the doorway because I wanted answers too badly. He looked thinner than I remembered, almost gaunt, his clothes clinging to him with a heavy droop of fabric that had been soaked and dried too many times. His cheeks were hollow, his eyes darker, as if something behind him had been worn down to its last thread. He didn't move toward me, didn't blink, didn't even shift his weight. He just stood there with the posture of someone who had forgotten how to share space with another person. The light from the lantern trembled slightly, casting a sheen across his hair, and I realized parts of it were stiff with frost or salt or something that made the strands clump together like kelp washed ashore. I said his name before I even meant to, the words spilling from me with a shock that made my throat tighten. But he flinched like the sound hurt. He didn't look angry or startled, just fragile, like he was afraid the moment would crack if he acknowledged it too quickly. My mind scrambled for the usual questions. Where he'd been, why he left, how long he'd been at the cabin. But the silence between us made every thought feel microscopic compared to the weight pressing against the walls. The cabin felt smaller with him standing there, the air too still, the temperature dropping almost imperceptibly as if something had followed him in. He took a breath, shallow and uneven, the kind of breath someone takes when they haven't spoken aloud in a long time. "You shouldn't be here," he murmured, voice low and hoarse enough that it seemed dragged up from deep inside him. The words didn't sound scolding or harsh. They sounded scared. Not of me, but for me. His gaze flicked the floor, then the windows, then toward the lake as though checking if something had slipped inside behind me. The way he moved his eyes made my skin crawl. It wasn't the frantic scanning of a paranoid person, but the practiced vigilance of someone who had lived with a threat long enough to memorize its rhythm. When he stepped forward, the floorboards groaned under a weight that wasn't entirely his, a groan too deep for a single footstep. He noticed my reaction and stopped immediately, pressing a hand to the doorframe as though steadying himself. His fingertips left faint smudges of dampness against the wood. "You need to leave," he whispered again, but quieter, like he was trying not to wake something sleeping in the rafters. I felt a cold ripple go down my arms, the same sensation I used to get as a kid when the lake water reached my knees, an instinctive warning that the chill didn't come from weather. I forced myself to keep my voice steady as I asked him what happened to him, expecting him to look at me, to offer something human in response. But instead his gaze dropped to the ashes on the floor. His expression tightened. "That's not for you," he said, voice barely audible. "Those keep it out." He pointed to the markings, the spirals and strokes that suddenly seemed less like frantic scratches and more like a map someone had copied from a place no one should visit. My stomach twisted, not at the words themselves, but at the emphasis he placed on it, like the shape of the world narrowed into that single pronoun. I asked what it was, and for the first time his eyes met mine directly. It was like staring into a reflection cast by deep water, distant, distorted, and carrying something heavy beneath the surface. "You need to go before dark," he said, voice breaking. "I can't stop it anymore." I wanted to believe he was unstable or traumatized or suffering from years of isolation, but something in the room pushed back against that explanation. The cold wasn't fading. The air felt thick, like breath fog even without exhalation. And somewhere beneath the floorboards, deep under the cabin where the pilings met the earth, I heard a faint, deliberate sound, a drag, a slow pull, something shifting just enough to let the knowledge settle that we were not alone. My uncle stiffened, shoulders rising, head turning toward the back wall with a dread so practiced it looked almost routine. When he spoke again, it was a whisper meant only for me. It remembers blood. He moved then, not toward me, but past me, heading for the door with a limping urgency that made fear knot in my stomach. He grabbed my arm with a grip that felt colder than his skin should have been. "If you stay," he said, barely forming the words, "it will come out of the water again. It always does when the family returns." Before I could respond, a soft thump echoed from beneath the cabin, then another, followed by the unmistakable shift of something climbing. My uncle's eyes widened, pupils dilating in a way that made him look momentarily feral with terror. He pushed me toward the exit with shaking hands. "Get off the porch," he whispered, voice threadbare. "Don't let it see your feet." And then the cabin floor creaked again, slow, searching, like a wet palm dragging itself upward. I stumbled off the porch, nearly tripping over the warped boards, my heart hammering so hard I thought it might burst through my chest. The chill in the air wasn't just cold. It pressed against me, invasive, like the fog itself had mass, and the sound from beneath the cabin grew sharper, wetter, more deliberate. Each thump carried a dragging, gurgling echo, a rhythm that didn't belong to anything natural. My uncle didn't move behind me, didn't call my name. He was frozen in place, staring down at the shadows stretching along the edge of the cabin like black tendrils. I could feel the weight of his fear, without him needing to speak it. Then I saw it. The first glimpse was brief, a shadow separating itself from the moss on top of the lake as it sauntered to shore, moving with a sickening grace that no animal should possess. Its legs bent in impossible angles, thin and angular like the deer I had chased in childhood dreams, but the limbs were far too long, far too crooked. It didn't run. It stalked, fluid and patient, stepping across the damp ground as if the earth itself yielded to its weight. I tried to scream, but my voice lodged in my throat, and all I could do was freeze and watch it approach the cabin's corner. Its head lifted, glistening wet and unrecognizable, and a faint glimmer of teeth caught what little light spilled from the cabin. My stomach lurched violently. The shape of its body was partly submerged in the mist, partly visible, muscles and sinew pulsing unnaturally, scaled or slick like it had emerged from the lake itself. My uncle finally moved, a stiff, shuffling retreat toward the tree-line behind us. He grabbed my arm again, dragging me backward, muttering fragments I couldn't parse, a litany of warnings that slipped in and out of coherence. Do not step in water. Never let it see you. The mist, it follows footprints. His breath hitched with every word. I barely registered the meaning before a wet slap against the porch made me spin. The creature had reached the boards. Its limbs were grotesquely long, claws, or something like claws, scratched across the weathered planks. It would groan under its touch, small pieces flaking off with a damp, sucking sound. I felt the vibration through my feet, through my bones, and a cold wave of nausea swept over me. The air thickened around us. The mist swirled unnaturally, almost as if the creature was tugging at it like a cloak, drawing it in closer to hide itself. My uncle's face twisted in terror, and for a fleeting instant, I thought he might speak some final warning, but the sound never formed. The creature paused, head cocked, jaws parting slightly to reveal teeth that glinted in a faint, sickly way, too jagged, too numerous to be normal. It made a sound then, a wet, gurgling hiss that seemed to vibrate through the cabin, through the trees, through me. My chest tightened, and I felt my knees weaken. "Run." My uncle gasped finally, his voice raw. He shoved me harder toward the tree-line, forcing me to stumble across uneven ground, away from the porch. The moment I left the cabin, the thudding underfoot ceased. The mist rolled outward, parting just enough to let me see the dark figure retreating into the fog, gliding over the wet grass like it had no weight at all. The air stayed cold, too cold, and the silence that followed was unnatural, thickened by anticipation. I didn't dare look back. My uncle's hand slipped from mine, and he disappeared into the tree-line almost immediately, leaving me standing alone on the damp, trembling ground, clutching the notebook I hadn't even realized I'd kept with me. I didn't stop running until I reached the edge of the woods where the road curved back toward the main highway. Even then, I could feel it in my peripheral vision, the mist lingering like it was alive, curling around the tree trunks as though waiting for me to let my guard down. I'm posting here because I don't know what else to do. I'm in a roadside motel, too far from the lake to see it, and I can't stop thinking about what I saw at the cabin. The lake, the footprints, the markings on the floor, my uncle, and something else, something in the water that shouldn't exist. I don't know what it is or what it wants, but it's patient and it knows me. I'm writing this while it's still fresh, before I try to sleep, because I need someone, anyone, to know what's happening. Story 3. I found a kid's book that makes you happy forever. It is just a kid's book, a title spelled in rainbow blocks, thick pages. Almost a baby book, really. The recommended age is 3 to 5. Zoe, and I found it in a dusty box in the storage room at Cold End Preparatory School. Mrs. Lemon, the owner, tries to make us feel better by calling us after-school teachers. But we are babysitters. The most teaching we do is to remind the kids to not pick their noses during snack time. Our real job is to keep the kids safe and at least somewhat entertained while their doctor and lawyer parents make the money to pay the tuition. The work isn't glamorous or interesting, but for a part-time job, the pay is good. Private school and all. There were only a handful of kids today. Mrs. Lemon said it was a popular week for vacations. Seeking to make the most of her money, Mrs. Lemon assigned me and Zoe to clean out the storage closet while she watched the children. We weren't sorry. Cleaning out the closet was easier than corralling the kids. The hardest part was not choking on the dust. Even in the dark closet, we could see the thick gray blankets of dust on the cluttered shelves. "Can you turn on the light, Hooper?" Zoe asked. I flicked the switch. Nothing happened. "Hooper?" "Sorry, I did." I looked up to see an empty socket. Well, damn. I gave Zoe a nervous look. "Don't say that. Mrs. Lemon might hear you." Zoe is the best part of the job. I don't want her to get fired. Shit, that's right. I wouldn't want to lose this chance of a lifetime. I tried to not let her see my dopey grin. We better get started. I ripped open a box. Its cardboard was soft with age. Manila folders filled with what looked like old personnel records. Box of junk here. I looked back to see Zoe playing on her phone. I coughed to encourage her to get to work. "What about you?" She sighed and started to tear open the box closest to her. It was a smaller box about the shape of a pizza box. It sat crooked on a bigger box, like someone had thrown it in the closet in a hurry. "Well, let's see." She tossed a strip of cardboard into the shadows and pulled out the book. From the fluorescent light in the hallway behind us, I could just see its cover. It showed a papier-mâché sun behind a platinum blonde girl, smiling in a pink dress. Or it was supposed to be a girl. Walking over to Zoe to look at the book more closely, I saw that it was actually a grown woman. She looked like a girl because she had sharp circles of blush on her cheeks and stone-stiff pigtails on her shoulders. Her toothy smile looked like it hurt. "What the hell?" I asked. Zoe didn't seem to notice how wrong the book was. She laughed at it like it was a tacky knick-knack. "Oh man, how long do you think this has been here? It's probably older than Mrs. Lemon." "P, put it down. Let's get back to work." Hold on. We have to read it." She sat down on a box and gestured for me to sit in front of her. I sat. I have never been able to tell a girl no. "Okay, quick." Zoe started to read like she was back in the classroom, trying to calm down a mob of kids. She turned the cover towards me with a dramatic flare. I looked away. The woman's smile was too bright. The national television network presents Sunny Sandy. I should have ripped the book from her hands right then. Meet Sunny Sandy. Sunny Sandy lives in Sunnyside Square, where the sun can never stop shining. Sunny Sandy is a good girl. She is always sunny. She is never sad, or angry, or tired, or hungry, or scared. That would be bad. Sunny Sandy is a good girl. She is always sunny. Always. By the time Zoe read always, the hairs of my neck were standing straight. I breathed a sigh of relief when she closed the book. I expected to see her sharing my fear. Or, knowing Zoe, maybe rolling her eyes. I did not expect her smile. How precious, she cooed. Wasn't that precious? Her eyes were harsh rays of sun beating down on me. I stood up to escape the heat. Not particularly. Let's get back to work. I went to take the book from her. She held it tight. Now, don't be silly. Hooper, we're going to read it again. She took my hand and tried to drag me back to the ground in front of her. The iron of her smile matched the iron of her grip. Like hell. I snatched the book from her. When she tried to hold on to it, she fell backwards over the box she had been sitting on. In the cramped closet, there wasn't enough space between her head and the wooden shelf. Her head cracked on one of the crossbeams on her way down. I dropped the book and rushed over to her. She was lying in a slump between the box and the shelf. Her arms and legs were stuck up like she was an insect on its back. Blood rushed from the crack on the back of her head. I couldn't see the wound, but the red pool told me it had to be deep. Through all that, she held her smile. "Come on," I shouted. I lifted her into my arms. "We have to get you to the hospital." Her voice was perfectly calm. "Thank you, Hooper. That's very kind of you." I took her to Mrs. Lemon, who drove her to the hospital. Between the crack on the wood and when I laid her in the passenger seat of Mrs. Lemon's pickup truck, Zoe never stopped beaming. I watched the kids until their parents came for them. I played pretend with them to stop my mind from imagining what might be happening to Zoe. I didn't want to go home at the end of the day. I still hadn't heard anything, and I wasn't ready to be alone with my thoughts. Procrastinating, I went back to the storage closet. Standing in the hallway light, I saw the woman smiling up at me. I thought back to what Zoe had said. We're going to read it again. This book had broken my friend. But how? It was just a kid's book. I opened it. The first few pages were as boring as any other kid's book from the 90s. Pictures of the woman walking through a cartoon town, square, then down a brick main street. Then they turned wrong on the page with the words, "She is never sad." The woman stood over a striped cat with a collar that said Mr. Tiger. The cat was dead. Another picture showed her sitting in a country church pew beside a woman dressed in black. In another, she sat in a closet smaller than the storage closet around me. It looked like she had not bathed or been outside in days. On the last page, the one with the words, "She is always sunny." Always. The woman was lying in a coffin. She still wore pigtails in her hair. And she still smiled, the same smile I had seen on Zoe's bloody face. I feel like Sunny Sandy is inside me now. She's watching me to see if I behave. I'm not sure how long she'll let me write freely, so I wanted to post this here where I know people will see it. I wish I was fighting back tears, or a scream, but if you were looking at me, you'd think I was reading a love letter from Zoe. I look peaceful. I am scared, very scarred. Happy Hooper is a good boy. He is always happy. Always. Story 4. The sun hurt people. It started just hours earlier. The family had just gotten home from a trip out to the beach. I had elected to stay in my room and play video games during that time for obvious reasons. Dad and Jamie were fine, but Mom had a wicked sunburn that spread from her left shoulder down to her lower back. As Dad looked over her, he noticed a few things that, while not concerning, would require maybe a second glance. Jesus, Susan, looks like a 3rd or 4th degree burn. I think we ought to take you to the doctors. My mother insisted she was fine, but that turned out to be a lie a few hours later. She had gone to rest in her room, and the rest of the U.S. could hear her moaning and crying out in pain. My dad wasn't going to sit by and let it happen. He elected to take her to the ER. "You guys go in your rooms. I'm taking her to the doctors whether she wants to go or not. Those burns are bad." So, into our rooms we went. I had plenty to do in ways of entertainment. I wasn't sure about Jamie, but his intentions were made clear when he knocked on my door. "Hey, Sam, you got 2 controllers, yeah? Think we could play something together?" "Sure." And so, for the next few hours, we played whatever games we felt like. It was a Friday, and also summer, so we didn't really care about having a bedtime. The call came at 10:47. It was Dad. My phone buzzed, and I immediately answered. "Dad? What's going on?" "Is M.O. I'm on speakerphone, Sam." "Okay." Dad was now able to communicate with the both of us. "Boys? Boys. Your mother, she isn't doing so well. What we thought was a 4th degree burn is looking more like one that doesn't exist. Not officially, anyways. Jamie spoke up first. T, then what is it? It's not really an official term, but the doctor said it looked more like it might be closer to severity of what would be a 5th-degree burn. Wow, what does that mean? I asked. I could feel the nervousness through the shaking in my voice. Well, we did some tests, he said, taking a break, so he could continue talking without any issues. It looks like the burn didn't stop at just a bone. Jamie and I looked at each other. I spoke first. The hell does that mean? It means, he said, cutting himself off before finally speaking again. It means that it somehow reached the marrow of her bones. The sunburn is affecting her bone marrow. We had to take a second. Whatever sun exposure Mom had experienced was so extreme that it not only burned her down a bone, but it burned her on a level that isn't medically classified. I had to ask, how? How does it look? My dad only had 2 words to say. It's bad. He didn't end up telling me the details until later. I heard an agonized scream from the other end, and it wasn't hard to connect the dots. Hey, I think I'm gonna let you go now. Jamie and I, we can take care of ourselves. Don't worry about us. Okay, you boys just stay inside. Especially you, Sam. I'll check in with you guys in a few hours. God, I think I'm starting to develop a sunburn too, shit. And with that, he hung up. Jamie turned to me. Dude, what the hell is happening to Mom? I don't know, man. It's not normal, though, burned inside the bones? I don't think. That's not normal. No, it isn't. I think we just have to wait and see what happens with Mom and Dad. Why, yeah, he replied. I noticed a hint of nervousness in his voice. Something wrong? I asked. He exploded. Yes, I was out there with them. I went out into the goddamn sun, Sam. I was exposed to it. Now, I'll say, I wasn't exposed nearly as much as Mom was, but still. I think we should check me for any signs of sunburns. Please. I didn't think anything was seriously wrong with Jamie, but just to make sure he was okay, I obliged and checked him. Sam, what does it look like? I think you're fine, Jamie. Just how much time did you spend in the sun in relation to Mom? She was sunbathing while Dad and I went swimming, so you do the math there. Gotcha. So, you weren't too terribly exposed. Not saying you weren't exposed, just that it was as bad as Mom. Yeah. Okay, looks fine to me. Are you sure you actually spent any time in the sun? I can't see a sign of exposure anywhere. My voice caught in my throat. Sam, what's going on? Shit. What? You're back. Your back, Jamie. It's on your back. There, on Jamie's left lower back, was a splotchy, blistering red rash signaling the start of what would likely be a nasty sunburn. What, Sam? You've got a sunburn, man. I don't know what the next few hours are going to be like, but I hope Jamie is okay. Things haven't gotten better. It's 1:06 and Jamie has been completely hysterical for the last 2 hours. He thinks that what happened to Mom is going to happen to him. And to be honest, I don't blame him. I can only imagine how it'd affect me. As of now, nothing substantial has actually happened to him. But it hasn't exactly been easy to tell him that. Dad hasn't called to update us on Mom's condition either. Maybe they're just sleeping, but I don't know, and that scares me. Every time I try to call, it goes straight to voicemail. So I left him one. Voicemail 1. Hey Dad, Jamie and I are doing okay. It looks like he's got a bit of a sunburn like Mom, but it isn't nearly as bad as hers. We're managing, but I need to know, is Mom okay? Call back as soon as you can. Please. I left that at 12:48. Jamie is still freaking out, but I told him it was going to be fine. I have not told him that Dad hasn't called or texted at all. I keep hoping for the best for Mom, but something is making me feel like that isn't going to happen. I'm scared for her because Jamie's sunburn is starting to get worse. He says that it hurts badly and he can feel it inching beneath the skin. I'm not sure what to do, honestly. I'm not a doctor and I don't know anyone who is. Also, something weird is happening. It's 1 in the morning, but the sun is starting to rise. I'm getting really scared now and I don't know what's happening. Well, a new development just occurred. The sun is rising. It is 1:15 in the morning, just a few minutes after sunset. I receive a call from our next-door neighbor, Ryan. I was too busy trying to figure everything out and try to get control of the situation with Jamie, who, by the way, isn't doing good at all. I missed the call, so he left me a voicemail. I think I regret listening to it. Regardless, here it is, Ryan's voicemail. Sam, are you there, man? Some weird shit is happening, and I've got no clue what to do. I think my grandma's dead. Dude, earlier in the day. She was in the sun or something like that. She stayed out there for so long, man. Had a wicked sunburn when she came back in. Complained about how badly it burned hours later. She said it felt like it was burning in her bones. In her bones, man. What the fuck? Last I saw of her, she was sat in her recliner in the living room. Her skin, God, her skin was terrible. It was splotchy in some spots, littered with blisters in others, and Ryan struggled to tap here as he began to dry heave. It even looked like some spots were peeled down to the bone. But here's the fucking weird part, dude. Her bones looked like they were full of tiny holes, and they looked burnt. There was a spot on her head peeled down to the skull, and a gaping hole exposed the innermost part of her head. She's not breathing. I think she's dead. My parents haven't come home from their date night yet, and I'm scared that something's happened to them. I'm hiding out of my room now, but fuck man, I'm scared as hell. If you can call, then please do so. Oh God, F-U-C-K. Fuck. Shit. Sam, I'm sorry. I'm starting to develop a sunburn on my hand. Must have happened while I was helping Grandma inside. I need to take care of myself now. Sorry. And that was the end of the voicemail. Judging from what Ryan said, I think he as well as his parents and Grandma are dead. I can only assume that my parents suffered the same fate. Jamie is asking about them now, and I'm wondering whether I should lie to him just to make his last moments a little less unbearable. I'm blocking out all the windows in the house. I can't let any sunlight in. I've made Jamie as comfortable as possible, but I don't think he has long. I'll update when something substantial happens. 7:16. Sun is fully up now. Dad isn't answering my calls. Neither is Ryan. I think they're both dead. Jamie, God, it's horrible. Last I checked on him, the entire left half of his face was so badly burnt that it peeled down to the bone, marrow leaking out of tiny holes in his skull. I think he's dead. There are so many bodies in the street. People I once knew and greeted as friends in the neighborhood. Some looked normal, others like they had been skinned. There were some bodies with everything intact except the skulls, and vice versa. The police aren't answering my phone. Nobody is answering the phone. I managed to blot out all of the sunlight in the one room I'm staying in, my bedroom. It's fine for now. The house still has power and I can cover up enough to be safe to go and get food from the kitchen. But I'm starting to lose it. My entire family is dead, and the neighborhood is likely in the same condition. I'm completely and utterly alone. I can't go outside. There's not a doubt in my mind that I'll die painfully if I do. So I think I'm going to wait it out. I'll wait until the sun sets next. I'll wait until the next time it gets dark out, and I'll leave. I'll go somewhere safe. There has to be someone out there alive. I can't be the only one. There has to be someone alive. I haven't run out of food yet, but I need to start planning for when I do. I'm not so sure about my escape plan after all, because as I look outside, I think I can almost see it getting brighter. I don't think the sun is going to set anytime soon, if at all. So I'm writing this in a vain hope that someone might see it, that someone might answer my call and try to find me. The power just went out too. I'm having to use cell data just to post this. I'm losing hope. I'm going to have to go out soon. The food in the house is going to go bad. Please, if anyone is reading this, help. The sun is hurting people. And I don't know how much longer I've got until it does the same to me. The sun finally set. I think I'm going to leave. If I don't make it, don't expect an update. Update. Sun's back up again. I wasn't able to get home in time. We moved into a new apartment, but weren't the only ones living here. In the 9th grade, my dad told us we were moving again. By then, we'd shuffled between half a dozen shitty apartments since our mom died. I knew things wouldn't be any different this time, but I didn't expect it to be worse. As soon as our car pulled up in front of the drab Victorian 3-story, my heart fell. Is this all for us? my little sister asked, eyes wide. I shushed her and shook my head. Any place we could afford was probably Section 8. But she didn't need to know that. No, I told her. Lots of other people live here too. I did my best to settle in, make us comfortable. The rooms were big, drafty things with faded wallpaper that peeled at the seams. Our few belongings looked small and lonely inside them. Dad left us alone a lot. Sissy thought he was working, but I knew it was just as likely he was on a bender. I was always relieved when he left. When I saw his boots by the door, I knew to be quiet and careful. It was hard to sleep in that place. Dogs barked all night, and the windows leaked cold air. The ceiling creaked when the upstairs neighbors walked around. Sometimes they yelled. I always kept our door locked. I would lay in bed at night with my sister next to me, shivering under the blankets. And I dreamed we were not alone. There was someone else in the room. I shut my eyes tight. My heart pounded. When I opened them, there was only darkness. I tried to control my breathing. Told myself I made it up or it was a nightmare. But my gut knew the truth. Because this wasn't the first time I'd seen her since we'd moved into the house. I realized there was something worse than a drunken father. There was something that lurked in that place, creeping around the edges of my sight. Something that had been there before us. Something that lived there with us. My father never saw her, not even when I could see her almost plain as day, standing in the shadowy doorway while we ate dinner. A normal person would scream or run, but I didn't. I knew if I said something, Dad would beat me for being crazy, and Sissy would cry because we were fighting, so I did nothing. My spoon trembled as I brought it to my lips, but I would not draw attention to what I saw. But I wasn't the only one who saw her. A few days later, we were in the kitchen, making macaroni and cheese. It was just the two of us, but when I turned around, she had set the table for 3. Daddy won't be home for dinner, I said. It's just us. She popped into her seat, and I made her a bowl. That's not for Dad, she said. It's for the sad lady. I stared at her, fearful. She shrugged. She probably gets hungry, Sissy said, as she took a bite. I was scared, but I didn't press the issue. I had other problems on my mind. Dad wasn't at work so much now. He'd sit for hours in front of our grainy TV, not moving. The bad thing was that all the other rooms branched off the living room, and I had to creep past him to go to the kitchen or the bathroom or to leave. We were trapped. I wasn't sure what was worse, being there with him or being there without him. All I knew was that he grew more depressed by the day, and the trash clinked when I took it out. One evening, a storm rolled in. The rain pelted the window in our room, making it impossible to focus on my homework. Dad sat in his chair in the living room while we holed up in our room. Sissy rolled on the floor, carefully coloring a sheet for school. There was a flash in the window and a distant boom, and then the house went dark. My dad yelled from his armchair, "Go downstairs and flip the breaker." There was one place I never went in that house, the basement. We had an access door in our apartment to the stairwell. It was dark down there, dirty and damp, but mostly I didn't like going down there because of how it made me feel. It was claustrophobic and stuffy and oppressively silent, but it felt like someone was watching my every move. I slunk out of my bedroom, hurrying to obey before he threw something at me. I opened the door to the basement. It was pitch black. I reached back into the kitchen drawer and found a flashlight that cast a weak yellow beam, barely enough to see. I was halfway down the steps when I noticed the light reflecting on the basement floor. A sheen. The basement was flooded with water, but there was something else that made me stop. Sloshing. I stopped, frozen in place. I heard it again. I hadn't imagined it. I knew, dead in my heart, that she was down there. I couldn't take another step. My whole body trembled with adrenaline. I turned and ran up the stairs to the kitchen, slamming the door. But when I whirled around, I was face to face with my father. "Why is the power still off?" He asked me, softly. I gulped. "I don't know which switch to flip." I lied. "You'll have to do it." Irate, he pushed me aside and stomped down the stairs. He hated being inconvenienced, but I couldn't go down there. Not with her. My chest tight. I prayed he wouldn't see her, couldn't see her, and I held my breath. But he didn't come back up, and the lights didn't come back on. There was silence, and then a bang. Startled, my sister shrieked in the other room. I knew something terrible had happened, but I couldn't go down there. I cautiously picked up the phone and dialed 911. I don't know what I said, but I know I huddled with my sister until the ambulance arrived. I covered her eyes when they wheeled Dad's body out on the gurney. The paramedic told me it was the old, faulty wire in the box that electrocuted him, but I don't believe it. I think she killed him to protect us. Story 5. My sleep paralysis hallucination always vanished when I woke up. Tonight, he didn't. I'm no stranger to sleep paralysis and hypnagogic hallucinations, since I've been having them for quite some time, ever since I was a child. Almost every night for the past few weeks. Right as I fall asleep, I see someone sitting on the chair by my desk. It's an unfamiliar man, who I'd say looks like he's in his mid-30s. He's got shabby hair, wears a long-sleeve round-neck shirt and a pair of dirty trousers. He's got a very forgettable look. I say this because I've seen much worse in my nightmares. He often watches me, mumbles stuff under his breath, and acts like he's tired just sitting at the same place waiting for something interesting to happen. It's always vivid, and there's been several instances where I mistook him for an actual person in my room. Of course, he's not real, because he just disappears into thin air whenever I get slightly more conscious or aware of what's happening. In my more recent encounters with him, he'd say the most random things. You keep waking up too fast. I won't hurt you. Not at all. Hold still if they scratch. Just don't resist, please. None of his mutterings make sense. The best I can do is ignore him. In fact, I asked him to keep quiet, and he does happen to obey. While most of what I've been sharing with you here sounds typical in sleep paralysis and similar dreaming states, his behavior has been getting quite uncannily human recently. The recent encounters have become more silent, and I don't hear him saying anything decipherable. Not that I want to, but because it's not typical of my experience with this entity. Now, like I said, whenever I'd wake up fully, the room would be empty. It was easy to dismiss this as some sort of harmless yet disturbing state of sleep. About a week ago, I woke up in the middle of the night because something was biting me. Not a single bite, like dozens of bites. I flipped on my lamp and saw a cluster of those tiny black ants all over my sheets. I brushed them off, killed quite a few, and checked everywhere for crumbs or spills, but I could find nothing. My bed was clean. I woke up in the middle of the night to strip the sheets, vacuum, and spray peppermint to ensure they won't be back soon. I even taped the legs of my bed with Vaseline to trap any climbers. The next few nights, the same thing happened. The bites came in straight, little lines down my calves and forearms like a dotted path. I didn't notice that pattern until later. The next morning, I called an exterminator. They checked my house, the walls, the vents, nothing. There was no nest, nor was there a food source. Here's what messed me up. The ants only appeared when I was asleep. When I stayed awake for half a night, not a single ant crawled out, until an hour after I gave up and slept. I told myself the ants and the man must be connected. Maybe some sort of dream feedback loop. Maybe the bites were real, but my brain was filling in the rest. 2 nights ago, the man returned. He spoke more clearly than ever as he sat nonchalantly by my desk. I remember because I knew I was awake when I heard him. I had just drifted off when he said, "Don't open your eyes yet." I remember thinking how that was a weird dream sentence. He continued, his voice deeper than usual. "Just let them finish you this time." My skin crawled. I forced myself fully awake. My heart was pounding. I opened my eyes and he vanished, as usual, but the door to my closet was slightly open. I never leave it open. I hate it when they're open at night. It's a superstition from my childhood and a rule I still follow. I flipped the lights on and drew enough courage to investigate the closet. There was nothing out of place in it. I slammed its door shut and tried to sleep again once I killed the lights. Tonight is why I'm writing this. I woke up to the feeling of ants crawling in my mouth. Not near my mouth. In it, I gagged and spit them out, scrambling to turn on the lamp, thrashing wildly. I felt them all over me, hundreds of them stinging along my ribs and down my thighs, even clinging on the skin below my eyes. I couldn't control the pain. But as soon as I sat upright, the ants began moving, not away, not scattering like normal insects. They crawled in a perfect line off my body and across the bed. I froze. I watched them form a thin black trail that led directly to the closet door, which was open. It wasn't a crack this time. It was wide, and there was someone sitting inside. The man, his legs were folded neatly, knees up to his chest, hands resting on top. His posture was unnaturally stiff, too straight, and like he was balancing something on his head. His eyes, I can't explain it right. They just didn't blink. They didn't gaze. They vibrated, twitching in the wrong way. They shined like idle wells of water in the dim light. He wasn't looking at me. He was following the ants. The trail led right to his feet and into his trousers. I was fully awake, and I knew it. There was no dream fog, no drifting, and no paralysis. The bites, scratches, rashes, and unbearable itching ringed my entire body. I felt numb. He was still there. He lifted his head just a little, the tiniest movement, like a dying animatronic. In his quiet, almost bored voice, he said, "You woke up too early again." Without a second thought, I sprang off my bed and ran, hoping for this nightmare to end, for the man to disappear like he always did. I bolted out of the room as I grabbed my phone. I sprinted across the living room toward the slider door to get outside, and that's when I noticed a glass. It wasn't just cracked, it was shattered outward, as if someone had broken it and slipped inside from across the yard. There were footprints in the dirt outside, bare ones, a long pair, leading toward the inside. For a second I just stood there, staring at those tracks in the dirt, my breath fogging. I don't know why, but the thought hit me all at once. I had ran right past whoever had broken in. I'm standing in the cold outside, in my backyard right now. I can still see my bedroom window from here. The closet light just turned on. I'm calling for help. Story 6. You may flourish before you die. I remember that his name was strange, quite unlike anything I had ever heard of, especially being from the Northeast. And he didn't look much like the other students at our college. His clothes were ragged and seemingly barely put together, but he moved with a slow confidence when he transitioned from one of our classes to the next. He seemed to be happy in his loneliness. Occasionally, I'd see him outside the old brick science building, sitting there as the sun broke through the rolling autumnal clouds, as shadows ran across a very gaunt, fixed face. He rarely seemed to change his face. Now to think of it, he was a lot like some specter, and when I told my friends about that thought, it soon became an inside joke. One pal would say to me, "I saw that ancient ghost again, moving to the hall from the bathroom," while another asked, "How often do ghosts go to the bathroom?" I can't say I felt too happy when I'd see Lazarus. We shared some classes, and he'd just sit there in a manner that was simply quiet and stoic. Even the professors avoided conversation with him. They just seemed to nod when returning his exams. I decided that one afternoon I'd go speak to Lazarus. We shared an evening class, and I began to notice that we took the same path back to the dormitory. I caught up with him this one night. A thick fog had lain over the land, for it was mid-November now, and winter crept towards our collegiate hamlet. "Hey, Lazarus, right?" I began, extending my hand. He nodded politely and replied with my name. The walk back wasn't too long, and we simply just traded words on our shared class and the professor who taught it. Lazarus' judgment seemed to not only be fair, but he carried the wisdom of an almost ancient sage. In a simple sentence, He seemed to summarize the world upon our entry to the dormitory. He shook my hand again, and we both concluded with a "see you around." He was unlike any person I had come across before when we began to spend more time together as the fall semester continued. Most of what I could extract from him in conversation was that he wasn't a fan of the weather here in New England and the noise and the amount of wealth, and he thought some people were arrogant or rude, but he never said he missed home, despite his critiques. He seemed content with his new surroundings. It was more just making the right sense of him. I brought him into my circle of friends I had made that semester, once a specter, now turned human. The characteristic of Lazarus that we all seemed to like the most was his ability to party. He told us he was from somewhere down south in the mountains and that it would seem like a foreign country to us, but that we liked the moonshine and the bourbon. He had an aptitude for being able to locate marijuana. As well, we were never quite sure where he got it from. We weren't sure if his stoicism was one of these southern values. But he kept a straight face when he told us that he planned to stay at the dormitory throughout Thanksgiving to get loaded. I asked him if he wanted to come over for our family Thanksgiving. I didn't live too far away. He said no, and when we all returned, the weeks of school before heading home for winter recess, we still continued to drink bourbon and smoke the Lazarus grass. Back in September, when we all began at this university, Lazarus was the last person I saw and thought to myself that he'd only skyrocket in popularity among our dormitory. Yet, when we spoke one evening, he had mentioned, with that straight face, that he was excited to largely stay at the dormitory once again over break, with a brief half-week visiting some distant aunt up in Maine. I asked him if he wanted to come stay with me or any one of the folks in our friend group's homes over the break. He said no. I asked if he was planning on going home. He said no. I asked him why. He said that the place from which he came was boring, that it was dead, that there was nothing down there except trouble. We shared a shot of bourbon before my parents picked me up, and we buzzed off in the car. I didn't see him much in January or February. Occasionally, he'd swing by our small parties and have a drink or two, but then he'd swiftly head out. I asked him one night when he stopped by if everything is all right, and he said he hated the cold. He said that as much as he didn't want to return down south ways, he would over to spring recess. He said it in a low tone, like a dog humming, hungry on an empty stomach. It was only a few weeks away. He then told us also that where he's from, that is where he got his grass. He said that the laws down there aren't so Puritan as up here. Most folks didn't care as long as you kept to yourself. I began to wonder what kind of place produced Lazarus. I asked him if I could go with him, and he said no. When I leveraged that I would take him in my car, especially so that he wouldn't now have to hitchhike to the bus station. He said all right, but we were just going for a few days. You're a man who likes risk if you come down to mountains, Lazarus said as we skidded just past New York, making our way down south. People down here, it is a different world. But we'll be all right. We just mind our own business, and we'll be all right. I didn't say anything. I kept my eyes on the road. It rained heavily. I fiddled with the dial on the radio as we passed through various state lines. Soon, it seemed as though we were in a place where New York was just an imagined image. It was flat at first, but the shadow of the mountains began to loom. It was like a giant wave ready to consume the sticks they raised and call homes. And these homes became less and less, especially as we began to climb. Want to stop for a cigarette? We should now before it gets dark. Easy to lose your way up here. Best we floor to my place. Lazarus says, staring inquisitively at the road ahead. We get out of the car. A consuming gray haze reduces the visibility of where we parked a far less than a mile. I filter a cigarette out of my pack and hand it over to Lazarus. He leans over, lights it, and passes the lighter back to me. This must be gorgeous when the fog clears up here. We've been gaining some serious altitude. I say, with the butt end of my cigarette turning my words into a half mumble. Yeah, not too far now. A little more ways up the mountain. Then we grab our shit. We get everything into the house. He pauses and then looks to me. You didn't like my place. It's old, but I take good care of it. And soon we're off again, the car engine humming as we climb the mountain. The house is old, but as Lazarus said, it was in great shape. As we pulled up in the car, as night just began to pull its curtain over the mountain, He gets out of the vehicle and hauls our belongings inside. On one side of the home is a thick forest. In the evening breeze and cool mist, the trees sway as if they all seem to form an ancient dance. The forest is alive, with insects humming and small creatures screeching that breaks the synchronized sway and ache of the swinging trees. "Hey!" Lazarus calls out in a muted tone. He stands on the old wooden front porch. "Let's get our shit and move inside, man. I'll take you round tomorrow. Hopefully this damn fog will break." And I move over to the car and throw my duffel bag over my shoulder while slamming the car door closed. "Hey!" Lazarus calls out again in the same muted resistance. "Keep it down. We may be up on a mountain, but folks still live around here." As I move closer to the porch, the sound of rushing water becomes present, and I can see a small river on the other end of the property, but not much beyond that, for the fog on the mountain is thick. "Come on now." Lazarus has the door open, waiting for me to enter the home. The lights in the home are cold and seem to flicker often. Lazarus says he prefers to use candles, so we light a few in the small kitchen area. I retrieve a bottle of bourbon from my bag, but he refuses, says that the first night here, maybe it is the altitude, is difficult to acclimate to by candlelight. He gives me a brief tour of the home. The rooms are well decorated, but sparse. He shows me to my bedroom. It looks as though no one has been in there for years. Crosses and ceramic angels layered in dust occupy most of the shelves here. Lazarus continues the tour after I place down my duffel bag. This is the attic. It is my favorite room in the house. Spent a lot of time up here. I ascend a few of the steps and try to look around inside, with only the last light of the rainy day showing the silhouettes of trunks and maps. As I descend, he tells me sternly, "Remember the attic, my friend." I was a bit nervous at this point, but upon the return to my room, I drank from the bourbon and stared in the dark room and listened to the primitive world outside. I woke up with a slight headache and a knocking at my door. I yell out, "Just 1 second," and swing open the wooden door. It's very bright now, but the fog is yet to lift, but the little bit of rain that seemed to only leak from the sky has left. Lazarus looks as if he's been waiting, but he seems excited, especially when he says, "Man, I can't wait to show you my favorite breakfast spot." We hop in the car and begin descending down the mountain. The fog, like a watercolor palette of blended yellows and oranges, won't allow the sun rays to fully break through its wall. As I rub my forehead, Lazarus begins speeding down the mountain quicker and quicker in my car. I tell him to take it slow. He says he's just excited to get to town. What I initially imagined to be a 5-minute cruise turned into almost 40 minutes of speeding down empty streets lined only with those tall, swaying trees. And finally, we seem to break out of the fog. I look in the mirror, and as we drive further in the sunrise, I can see the wall of the mountain. Even in the morning, it seems consumed by its own shadow. I turn forward as we move into a small town. Despite the warm spring sunshine, the town is a dismal limb of this world of Lazarus. A group of children smoke cigarettes in torn t-shirts as they seem to stare up at the mountain. A woman glares at us as we drive by, and I notice that she is pushing a shopping cart filled with some kind of soft padding. We pull into a largely empty lot. The diner that lay before my parked car is the cleanest building I've seen. As we step inside, the bell attached to the door rings, and a solemn woman looks up from her crossword. Lazarus waves limply. We sit on 2 stools toward the end, and she saunters over with a pot of black coffee. "Haven't seen you around here in some time. You the O'Leary's kid?" He nods, ushering forward his empty cup. "Where are your parents these days?" she asks, filling his cup of coffee that doesn't seem to steam. "Florida," Lazarus replies softly, redirecting his eye contact. I then move my cup toward the woman. She still looks at Lazarus. Fastest family to move up that mountain and leave. I can say that. A silence prevails, and she seems to switch her mood and asks us what we like to eat. When our food comes, I can barely keep it together. I can feel my heart pounding in my chest. I think about where else I could have gone for spring recess. I start to pester Lazarus. Quietly, "I don't like this town, the mountain." He sips his coffee. "Me neither. You wonder why I told you not to come." I begin to raise my voice. Why didn't you tell me your parents moved to Florida? Why don't they live up there anymore? He replies back in his unexpressive, stern manner. It's a bad market. There used to be a big industry in this town, but it is gone. There's no money here anymore, okay? The volume grows between us with every response. It's not the poverty. Lazarus, there's something there. What the hell are you talking about? I look away from Lazarus and the waitress, and two men in a nearby booth all stare at us. I go quiet immediately. Lazarus looks around, and then back to his coffee. In a low tone, the waitress says without a blink, his folks were right to move. The devil lives up in the mountain, and the devil's angels roam the land up there, turn men into bones. We drive further away from the diner, away from the town, and down a few hills. I can't find the capability to speak anymore. Look, man, Lazarus begins before a sigh. The sad truth is that around here, people are prone to believing in old folk tales and religious crap. I say nothing as we continue down the road. Look at me as an example, right? I never believed in that shit. Sure, it's creepy to hear about, but folks need ways to explain their own dire situations, so they blame some shit on the mountain. It's just a sad circumstance. My folks were lucky enough to move over to Florida. In a break among the tree-lined road, there appears a gas station. Lazarus pulls the car into the back lot and says to me, "Look, buddy, I'm glad you came down here, all right? I'm going to turn what started as a weird morning into a good night, all right? And then we split tomorrow, okay?" I nod, sigh, and tell him, "Yeah, all right." He steps out of the car and returns a few minutes later. He throws up each one of his hands, with one being a case of beer and the other what seems to be a bag of weed. He throws a few logs into a small stove fire pit. He is out behind the back door. The fog is still there, but a breeze blows through the mountain, and after the second beer, the sound of the trees and the wildlife in those dark woods seems less threatening. Even if I can still picture the stare and repeat the words in my head of what the woman at the diner said earlier. But nonetheless now, I had made my proverbial bed. I did choose to come down here, and Lazarus was right. He'd lived up here on the mountain for a while now before attending school. He wasn't foolish enough to return to some haunted place. It almost reminded me of the history of my New England. The Puritans, terrified of the woods, woods that were now all colonial homes. Now a few beers deep, the sway of the trees is almost hypnotic, and as I return from my bedroom with a bottle of bourbon, I've witnessed something I've never witnessed before. As he rolls his marijuana cigarette, Lazarus tells a story about fishing on the Mississippi one year with his father. His old man caught something too big, Lazarus says, and tipped the boat over. And for the first time, I witnessed Lazarus break with laughter. Over the primitive symphony just beyond the pines, we cheers and begin passing the joint back and forth. And as we regale stories to one another from our first year of school, and suddenly, an empty look appears on Lazarus' face. I ask if he's been missing college, noting his change in behavior. He tells me to be quiet. I notice that the hums and haws, the screeches and coos, and even now, the crickets have all ceased their calls. It is just the sway of the trees and the fog, and nothing else. Lazarus is wide-eyed. Just then, a scream, no less than half a mile away from where we sat. Lazarus pours his beer out on the fire before saying in a hushed but direct tone, "Attic, attic, now go, now." He lies low as we move quickly toward the house. The scream, again, echoes, now just a bit closer. The sound seems to make the pines themselves shiver. It is an indescribable, ancient, guttural call. I feel nothing but the sense of flight as we run low into the house, and Lazarus closes the door and says, "No lights. Attic now. We need to move." In the darkness, I can see almost nothing. I feel frantically for the ladder. We ascend the ladder upwards, and he follows behind. He closes the hatch after we ascend and sits on top of it. I whisper, "Lazarus?" and I begin to feel fear begin to melt my entire being. He responds back, "If you say nothing, if you stay quiet, we will be all right." I can hear the door in the kitchen open, but I hear no footsteps follow. I cannot move. I can no longer feel my body. All I do is sit and stare. from a pale light that filters through the attic window. I can see that Lazarus has his eyes shut tight. We both jump as we hear the door slam shut. Lazarus looks at me and shakes his head as if to say we're still not in the clear. And after that, time keeps passing on and we sit as statues before Lazarus whispers, "I think we can go now." I ask if he means to grab what we brought, throw in the car, and drive far away from this mountain. He says we can leave at night, that we won't make it. And I ask him what it was, and he simply says, "I do not know, but I've seen it before." The more questions I ask, the more he stays silent, still sitting upon the trapdoor hatch. He now leans his back against the wall and closes his eyes. I realize then that there is nothing I can do but wait until dawn, so I ask, "Can I at least lay down up here?" And he sorrowfully nods his head. I can't sleep. I watch the pale light from the window just barely bloom more luminous as the sun breaks in a new day, and don't look over to Lazarus until that familiar yellow-orange hue seems to wipe the wall beside me. I don't think he's closed his eyes. He just stares forward, but he's simply stuck within his own mind. I say to him in a soft tone, "Lazarus," and he exits the state he's in and looks at me with a sense of melancholy. "Yes? Can we go now?" I ask. He nods solemnly. "Yes, we need to be quick. Last thing we do is turn on that car of yours." I nod. He moves slowly as he lifts the hatch and drops his head below, looking around inquisitively. "We're good," he says, as we descend. I begin to ask about what happened, but he stops me before I can finish the following sentence and says, "Look, when we get in the car, when we descend the mountain, I will tell you everything I know. But most of what I know is that we must leave now." I nod and begin to sprint toward the room where I had stayed the first night. As I begin to get closer, I notice long carvings upon the wall, as if someone dragged a knife deep into the wood and carved as they made their way to the room where I stayed. And then I hold my breath as I slowly push open the bedroom door. My nose is immediately met with the smell of something rotten. Several flies buzz. The ceramic angels have all been crushed, and the crosses lay upon the floor. I lean forward, retaining my foot and look upon the other side of the bed, but there is nothing. I grab my bag and run back toward the car. I can't find Lazarus. His bag is on the front porch. He's nowhere near the car. I run back towards the stove fire pit. The woods howl with wildlife. The fog seems thicker than usual. As I make my way towards the other side of the property, where the small river lay, I yell out, "Lazarus?" As I near the river, the forest quiets, but now the fog seems to blow away like smoke from an extinguished fire. It lifts quickly. There is no Lazarus near the river, and my eyes follow toward the other side, where a large dirt mound begins to reveal itself foot by foot as the fog dissipates. And finally, I can begin to see the sky. But a figure begins to appear from behind the mound. It begins with one, and others seem to follow. I stand there, completely frozen, as I watch them ascend to the top of the dirt mound. As they stand in file, I look at each one of their mangled, distorted faces. Their skin is carved with intricate designs. Their faces are almost human, but equally missing features. The one in the middle, standing tall, points his finger at me. One of the creatures falls to all fours and descends the embankment rapidly, making its way toward the river. I begin to flee. I rush up the hill, back toward the house. Upon the side of the porch sits Lazarus, with tears down his face as he says to me, "We should have never come here. Now it's too late." Story 7. It was just a door. It was not my intention to go through the door, but you see a door in the middle of your family's land, and you think, sure, why not? but I am getting ahead of myself. Let me explain a thing or two so you understand what led me to the door. I am by no means an interesting person, unless you think a gay gamer nerd who works a corporate job in a small town is interesting. Do not misunderstand. I love my life. My dog Jasper keeps me company while I sit at my computer and play whatever game I am obsessed with. Right now, it is Wizard 101. Yeah, people still play it. However, I would be lying if I did not say that nothing exciting really happens to me. That was until the door. My apartment does not have any laundry hookups. So I do my laundry once a week at my grandparents' house in the middle of nowhere. I also tend to do puzzles and listen to D&D podcasts while I wait for clothes to finish. Like I said, nerd. This also gives my aforementioned dog Jasper a chance to run around unhindered by a leash or my watchful eye, though he does sit at the window and whine for attention. I should also mention that when I was younger, I would walk around my grandparents' land all the time, playing games of magic and storytelling that could possibly make a pretty good fantasy series, if I do say so myself. I say this to add that the place has always had a mystical feel to it. There are woods there, fields for cows to graze, and even tanks. It is a body of water bigger than a pond, smaller than a lake, usually man-made. Beyond mystical, though, it was always tense, like when you run your finger over zit that is just ready to be popped. Just one small nudge or tear, and it is over. That is what the door did. We drove up to the house on a Sunday after a particularly brutal week of work. Annoying co-workers, difficult clients, etc., etc. The weather was all right, pretty mild in general. Grandma was in one of the many great-grandchildren's ball games, and so it was just me, Jasper, and probably my depression. I was getting along with the puzzle, and Jasper was just whining and whining for attention when I had the unnerving feeling of being watched. We always said that the house was haunted, either by family members or some random ghost. We did not know, but it made me want to get out of the house. So here I am, currently walking to the woods, Jasper by my side, exploring that which I have not in probably 5 or 6 years. You always feel like you're being watched in these woods, though, like a higher being or entity was ready to smite you, or an axe murder would get you for fun. The trees wove in such a way that you could not see the end of the trees, but they were not thick enough that you could not see the open pastures beyond. There was a fire a few years ago that got rid of all the brush, so the stomping around was pretty easy. I had been wandering for about 30 or so minutes when the hair on the back of my neck stood up, and the area around me was still and quiet. Not a natural silence either. Or, if I were to compare it to natural silence, it would be that moment before a thunderstorm begins, or that early foggy mornings where you do not know if the world ended and you are the last one left. With that feeling, I froze in place, not sure of my next move. Never in my life had I felt my nerve endings this raw and primal, ready to get me the F*** out of the area at the first break. That break actually came from Jasper, who started growling. Whoever is reading this, it may not seem unusual for a dog to growl during the situation, but for Jasper, it is horrifying. He is a calm, medium-sized Australian shepherd. Case in point, we were on a run the other day, and a dog 2 to 3 times the size comes charging at us barking. The owner is yelling. There's a mom across the street telling her kids to stay on the porch, and my friend is getting between this dog and Jasper. But what is Jasper doing? Nothing. He's just chilling, minding his own business, sniffing some grass, wondering why we aren't running. So when I tell you he started growling and had all the makings of an attack dog, I was scared. I broke the tension of the air before anything else could and darted out of the wooded area into what my family calls the new ground. We had bought it after the original tract of land my grandparents settled on, so that is what us kids called it, though maybe it had that name long before my family ever came into contact with it. Jasper was on my heels as I broke through the brush. There were some newly grown thorns tearing at me, but I did not care. One thing I learned growing up here: never let your guard down in the woods. The sweat was building on my neck and shoulders as we made it to the field. While the weather was starting to turn cold, the grass was starting to die, but still it was tall enough to conceal whatever had created the tension. Frantically, I looked around, Jasper going crazy trying to get my attention, as I tried to locate whatever was triggering both mine and Jasper's feral survival instincts. But as soon as we were both ready to fight to our dying breath, it stopped. The world decided we were not important anymore, and the tension dissipated like a breath after being underwater for a little bit. I nervously laughed as Jasper went back to his docile state, looking at me for pets. I crouched down and satisfied his need for pets. I got a little lost in his eyes for a second though, one full blue and the other brown with a quarter of it blue like the other. And I am a firm believer that while the guy has a very derpy face, he knows more than he lets on behind those eyes. As I stood up though, I froze in my tracks as I looked beyond our little pocket into the rest of new ground, where a door had appeared. I had walked these fields since I was 5 or 6, and never has there been a door. It was a nice door, sat on the far end of the field next to a very old tree that honestly was probably dead and just had not decided to fall, sticking it to God or something. As I looked closer though, I realized the tree was what was holding it up, and that roots were snaking through the edges of the door and ingraining themselves with the old tree. Curiosity got the best of me, and I walked towards the door. Jasper got the hint and followed close, either protect me or to be clingy. I know not. The air was tense again, or maybe it was just me. I do not know really. I looked around waiting for someone to pop out, but it was just me, my dog, a tree, and a door. As I got to the door, I realized that it was my size, and the roots sprouting from it were new, and not like, oh, they grew over a few years new. They were growing as I watched it, pulsing with some energy that I felt was not entirely on an axis of existence I was aware of. I felt Jasper tense as well as I looked around the tree. Nothing special other than a random door appearing. The sun had been shining when I began exploring the area, but now the clouds rolled in, gray and heavy with emotion, quickly blotting out the sun. The wind picked up, adding to crescendo of nerves. My adrenaline was already on edge, so it was only magnified as I waited for my next move. I said at the beginning of this, it was not my plan to open the door. I mean, honestly, you only see that in movies. However, as I stood there, waiting for the zip to pop, the door opened, and inside was nothing. Now, reader, I do not mean it was a room with nothing in it, or just dark. It was nothing. I could feel the lack of atoms, the lack of matter, the lack of existence from beyond the door, and I knew that it was not supposed to be here. Or, if it was, humans were not supposed to know about it. While I sat trying to calm my heartbeat and turned to leave, it hit me that I had not truly breathed in ages, causing me to take a quick inhale of air. Apparently, this was enough to scare Jasper, who darted forward. Before I could grab him, he crossed the door line and just disappeared. 1 second was my little fluff ball, and the next he was nothing and the door slammed shut. The weird thing though was that moments after he disappeared, I could feel his memory draining from my mind. I have had Jasper for almost a year now, but could not remember where I got him. The memories of how he would sit in a chair next to me while I gamed were losing color and form, disappearing into the nothingness that was the door. The depressive nights where I held him close and cuddled with me through the pain started to fade like a printer running out of ink. Or how when he wanted attention or needed to go outside, he would spin and yip at me until I went over and rubbed his head, causing him to lean into my hand, his soft fur bringing me out of whatever stupor I had been in. I could feel the tear on my face as Jasper slowly slipped from my reality. And as I slowly lost my best friend, I saw that the roots were growing even more viscous, growing and humming with energy that could only be the bond between a man and his dog. And the sadness I felt was replaced with rage. How dare this random door steal my dog away from me for its own gain, leaving me with a hole I had in my life that Jasper had filled so long ago. Like I said, I had all intentions of not going through that door. But if you are a dog owner, you know that I could not let that door have those memories. Without Jasper, my current self would be lost, and that was something I could not allow. It could not have my dog. Not now. Not ever. So, with a shaky step, I approached the door and, without a thought, knocked softly. The door creaked open, sounding almost like a stomach growling for food, and I did what any sane person would do. I stepped through. If you are reading this, I do not know how it got here, but maybe it can be a tether to my world, my reality, my axis. I know that my life right now may not be exciting and could be considered bland, but I can feel that palpable air of change, that while I may not be where I want to be, I am where I need to be. And I know that wherever I need to be, Jasper has to be right there by my side. Let's just hope that the door closing behind me doesn't sever this connection. Story 8. Never go into the walk-in cooler at night. I want to get on here and warn you all of something that never crossed my mind until what happened to me 3 months ago. I worked for a fairly big corporate grocery store here in the States and had been there for roughly a year. I worked the first few months in produce before having to be switched over to a store clerk after a coworker came back from maternity leave. I would not say I love the job, but it's definitely the best one I've had so far. Me and my boss are pretty chill, or at least I think so. He's a millennial and is just trying to be cool. He lets me take smoke breaks, listen to music when we aren't having a rush of customers, and even buy some snacks and sit outside for a few minutes while on the clock. It all started when he asked me if I would be willing to work on Friday night, which was one of my days off. Come on, Mikey. After all I let you do on the clock, you can pick up just one shift during the holiday season for me, man. My manager Tristan said with a sigh, after I'd told him that I preferred not to work on a Friday night. I see you online gaming all night on your days off anyway. Dude, it's not like you have anything going on. He was right. There was nothing I would love doing more after a long 4-day week than hopping online and playing for hours on end. It was easy to forget my life stresses by doing so. Well, I mean, I do like to game on Friday the most. All my friends are usually playing pretty late. Tristan seemed slightly annoyed with that response. Look, man, this is usually the busiest day for our location every year. We need you to work the night shift. You are the only cross-trained clerk that we have. Tristan said, trying to level with me. All right, here is what I'm going to offer you, Mikey. If you work this August 4th Friday night, I'll give you a paid day off after New Year. You can call it in whenever you like. I pondered the deal. Work Friday and have an even longer weekend later? Sure, why not? I said, I need money to buy some gifts anyway. I've been slacking. All right, I'll let James know to expect you Friday night. As Friday approached, honestly, I was slightly nervous. I had never worked a night shift here, so I did not know how to do closing tasks, although I assumed it's pretty similar to anywhere else that I had worked. All you have to do is just clean and stock up whatever stations you are told to. Simple enough. The night before Friday, I told my friends I wouldn't be joining them in any games, as I am gone to be covering at work for the one time. I was met with expected huffs and puffs about it, but they moved on within minutes, so it worked out just fine. Friday approached, and I sighed as the clock struck 7 p.m., and I had to hop off the game to go get ready for work. I arrived at 8:07, which is late, but it truly was never a problem. As soon as I got in, I got right to work. Tristan was not lying. I had to hop on the register not even 10 minutes into my shift and took customer after customer for just over 2 hours straight. I asked James, the night manager, about a break. He told me I was not getting one, and only a lunch, since I had to go catch up on clerk duties. I went out and fetched well over 100 carts before having to go in to sweep the entire store. As I went to the back to get the broom to sweep the whole store, I decided that I'm going to go sneak a drink from the walk-in cooler. Now, I know what you're probably thinking, and yes, I do mean sneak one. There are no cameras in the walk-in cooler because it is too cold for them to work, which meant that I could grab a drink from back there and have it. As long as I put it in the destroyed items claim bin, as I got back there, I ran into the other courtesy clerk, William. Oh, what's up, Mikey? I did not expect to see you working a night shift. Never mind on your day off, he said, as he was filling up the mop bucket on the opposite side of the walk-in door. Yeah, Tristan said that he needed coverage just this one time and I could use the cash, so I figured why not. I replied, hoping my desperation for him to leave, so I could go snag a drink wasn't apparent. Oh, definitely. The new guy already quit. Well, not even. He showed up to one closing shift and then left during his break. Didn't even clock out or anything. The rush wasn't even as bad as it usually is. But then again, this isn't for everyone. William said with a sigh. Well, I don't want to hold you up for long. I gotta go mop up some spilled milk. I swear these parents do not watch their children in this damn store. Fantastic. As William walked away, I checked down the hallway to make sure nobody saw me. Then I entered into the walk-in. I looked through the shelves of my limited options and decided on my usual strawberry milk. I hopped onto a pallet and reached for it off of the top shelf. I sat down, cracked it open, and began to chug. I had done this at least a dozen times since I'd started working there. Nobody was ever in here, and if they were, it was usually all before 9 a.m., so that everything was stocked up and ready for the first morning rush of customers. As I was taking a big swig, I heard the walk-in door handle being grabbed and faint talking on the other side. In a panic, I immediately got up, swung open the freezer door a few feet away, and ran in there. I pulled the door shut as quickly as I could without making any noise. The lights in the dark, cold freezer flickered on after a couple seconds, lighting up the room. I immediately pressed my ear against the thick door to see if I had any luck hearing anything. I heard the faint thud of the walk-in door closing and some muffled talking. I could not make out who was talking or what was being said due to the thickness of the freezer door. As I pulled my ear away from the door, I heard somebody try to open the freezer door. I heard the handle being pulled, but the door wasn't moving, followed by pounding on the door and faint calls out for me to come out. Shit, I thought. They must have been watching the cameras to see where I went, and I still had the drink. I looked around in a panic to try and see where the freezer claims bin was located when I noticed something very strange. There, across the cold metal room, was another big freezer door. I had never seen a third freezer here, or at any job I'd worked at. I tried filing through my memories of being in here. Maybe there was boxes in the way before. Maybe I never really paid much attention and just didn't notice it before. Slam. Mikey, come out here now. I heard a voice yelling to me through the cooler door. I took one look back at the mysterious third door and immediately ran to it and went in. I let the door shut behind me as I turned around to look at what was going on in this third freezer. The lights flickered on, slower and more dim than the regular freezer. It looked like nobody had been in there for a long time. A bunch of webs in corners and on the ceiling, a bunch of empty boxes scattered around the floor, and dirt running along the walls. I heard a very faint slamming sound coming from the first freezer. I wondered why they wouldn't just open it. It's not like it's the bathroom floor, Christ's sake. I sat on the dirty old floor and took a couple swigs of my milk, enjoying every drop, since it was the reason why I was so deep into the freezer. After what felt like a minute or two, the knocking stopped, and I felt confident to at least go back into the freezer. As I went to push the door handle, the knob wouldn't budge. I tried to push it in again, and it was stiff. I couldn't believe that it was frozen. I started to look around to find something in there that could maybe help break the ice. All the boxes were way too big, and I already had tried to use my milk bottle to no avail. All the shelves were empty and riddled with webs, except for one in the corner of the room. It had a tarp on it for whatever reason, but I was too desperate and cold to care why. I walked up to it and pulled the tarp off the shelf. In that moment, I realized that the tarp was not hiding what was on the shelf, but it was hiding what was behind it. I almost fell on my ass as I stumbled backwards in shock. Right behind that shelf was another freezer door. There is no way in hell this is happening. The store is nowhere near big enough for another freezer, I thought, as I began to have a sinking feeling in my stomach. I immediately grabbed the blue vinyl tarp and brought it back to the frozen door handle. I wrapped it around the knob and started rubbing my hands as fast as I could, pulling them off every few seconds to blow on them for any warmth whatsoever. I was hoping that I could create enough heat from friction to thaw out the handle and get out. I tried for a few long minutes before attempting to open the door again. No luck. Shit! I yelled out, slamming my fist onto the doorknob, which only brought immense pain to my cold and brittle hand. Help! Anyone, help! I can't get out of here. Somebody, please. I was yelling at this point, knocking and kicking the frozen thick metal door. I fell to the floor and began to sob. There was no other way to go but through the next door. After a minute of trying to warm my hands up and emotionally preparing myself, I got up and made my way across the room. The shelf that was in my way was about 6 feet tall, but very thin with nothing on it. I moved the shelf out of the way with ease and stared at the door for a second. I was hoping that maybe, just maybe, this door would lead to a secret exit outside, or maybe even a hidden bunker that only the owner of the store knew about. I grabbed the handle and it was stiff. I ended up yanking on it, and a thin layer of ice broke and fell off as the big metal door opened with a loud crack. A rim of thin ice broke off and fell in front of me. I went ahead and stepped into the dark room. The even colder air hit me immediately as I stepped in the room. The regular freezer was usually right at 0 degrees Fahrenheit or slightly below, but this was even colder. All of the hair on my body immediately stood up, and I got goosebumps from head to toe. After a solid 10 seconds or so in the complete darkness, the lights audibly crackled on. Half of them did not even turn on, while the other half were pretty dim. I looked around in a daze when I heard the freezer door behind me slam shut. Damn it, I cursed out loud. I should have left that damn door propped open. I'm going to freeze to death in here, I thought. I began to break out into shivering tears when I noticed something across the room, way in the opposite side in the corner. It looked like a cloth bag was sitting in this otherwise empty box. I slowly approached it, barely keeping my breathing at a normal pace when I realized that's not a bag, that's a human. Oh my God! I yelled out as I covered my mouth and stumbled backwards, unable to really process what I was looking at. I stared at it for a second. It looked like a teenage boy, body swollen from head to toe, blue and puffy, wearing the same uniform as me with a name tag that read Jesse. The name was barely familiar to me. I didn't quite recognize him, but in the state that he was in, I don't think anyone would be able to. Just then, I realized that he had on a sweatshirt underneath his work uniform. At this point, my survival instincts were already kicking in, so I rushed onto the floor right next to him and began taking off the clothes on his torso. His work uniform was a couple sizes too big, so it came off pretty easy, minus the few cracks and one large snap in his arms. The sweatshirt was a different story, though. I pulled out his puffy arms, one sleeve at a time, trying to hold my breath so that I wouldn't gag as much. The left arm came out with only a few cracks, but the right arm I had to really pull the sweatshirt off of since it was slightly more swollen. Pop! His shoulder was completely yanked out of place, and the arm really went limp, making it easy to slide off the sleeve. Now, his neck was extremely swollen, and I mean to the point where there was lumps everywhere, and his neck was about the same thickness as my head. I pulled and pulled, and the sweatshirt was not coming off without a fight. I decided to stand up to gain more leverage. I planted my feet and yanked as hard as I could, even putting my full body weight into it. Just then I heard a loud snap as I slammed my ass into the freezing metal floor. I got up to see his headless torso slam sideways into the ground. I then looked down at my hands and saw his head right there in between my hands. I yelled out in terror as I dropped his head in the sweatshirt, his head rolling a couple feet away as it slammed onto the floor. I immediately vomited up all my milk into a disgusting pink puddle onto the floor next to me. I wiped my mouth and got up, grabbing the sweatshirt, while avoiding looking at any of the body to avoid vomiting whatever was left of my body at this point. I threw it on and immediately felt some relief in the freezing cold, but was still shivering a bit. I realized my fate, that I was going to die in here like Jesse. I sat down and stared at the floor motionless, feeling defeated, regretting not just stepping out and taking whatever punishment it was for being in there stealing a drink on the clock. There's no way to be any worse than what has happened to me now. After what felt like an eternity, I heard a loud slam and crash come from across the room. I looked up to see what it was when the lights completely cut out. Another slam and crash from across the room, followed by what sounded like faint footsteps. Then another loud thud came from the last freezer behind me, with what sounded like almost an animal yelping out in pain. The lights cut back on, and across the room I saw a floor hatch slowly close, with Jesse's body being dragged down. At this point, I had no idea what in the hell was going on. I got up and pressed my back to the door as I stared at the hatch. I hadn't noticed it before, but it was pretty discreet. It matched the rest of the metal floor, with barely any visible creases, indicating that there was a hatch. As I was looking at it, A loud slam came from behind me, causing the freezer door to vibrate a little bit. I turned around in horror as I heard a painful groan come from the other side. It almost sounded like a zombie. That's the closest thing I could really compare it to. This next decision was by far the most stupid one I made that night. I went toward the floor hatch. In a panic, I searched for where in the hell I can open this thing from as I heard whatever was groaning in pain in the last room. I found the crease just big enough for two of my fingers to get a hold of as I lifted up the heavy hatch. I saw a bit of a ladder that led into nothing but darkness. As I was looking, I heard the freezer door start to open. I looked up to see it being pushed open when someone or something yanked me down the hatch. That was the last thing I remembered. I woke up on the floor. My head was throbbing and my body was aching in pain. As my vision started to come to, I slowly sat up and looked around. I was in a very dimly lit area with torches on the wall far and few between. As my eyes focused more, I realized that I was in a very, very long tunnel. I looked around and saw bodies upon bodies, all of them skeletons. My head was in too much pain to get up and run. But where would I run anyway? I slowly started to realize that there was a noise coming from a room across the long, dim hallway. It sounded like somebody was eating something very, very crunchy. The snapping and crunching sounded the exact same way as it did when I ripped Jesse apart for a sweatshirt. Just then I heard a creak come from above me. I looked up to see a bit of light coming in from the ceiling. Mikey? Mikey? Ah shit, man, are you there? Please, God, say something if you are. I heard a very familiar voice break through. My eyes focused to see my co-worker, William, way up at the top of the hatch. Ugh, yeah, I'm here, I-SHH, he said in a concerning manner. Do not make any more noise. IT will come eat you. I was in shock at this point. What the hell was down here with me? I had way too many questions swirling in my mind when I heard William again. Mikey, I need you to get up here as fast and quietly as possible. I have all the freezer doors open. Hurry before it comes. I forced myself up, still in a daze, and began climbing up the ladder. As I was up the first few of a dozen rungs, I noticed that the crunching across the long hall had come to a stop. It had been replaced with sound of something that was galloping, slowly growing louder. I forced myself to climb faster, almost missing a rung or two in my daze. You GH shit, man, hurry. Fuck, my leg. William called out. I looked up at him to see him only about 4 feet above me now. It all began to make sense as I saw that he had his uniform tied around his leg with what looked like a whole chunk missing from his thigh. He had filthy, bloody hands reaching down to me with scratches on his worried face. As I climbed up the last 6 rings, I heard the galloping at an alarming rate now. It sounded like it was halfway down the hall and was making insane timing. I forced myself up to the last rungs as I now heard something panting like a wild animal below me, beginning to climb the ladder. Grab my fucking hand, now. William was screaming at his point. I grabbed it, and he pulled me up with all his might. I made it out and back into the freezer just in time. We both looked down and saw a large, hairy, dark creature running up the wall at inhuman speeds. Hurry! Shut it! William yelled out while grunting through his pain. We slammed it just in time as the creature was only about a few feet away from the opening. What the fuck was that? I demanded William, with what little breath I had left. And how did you know I was down here? William sat down on the hatch. He was trying to catch his breath. While tightening his makeshift tourniquet, he began, never go past the first freezer, ever. It lures you in with curiosity, then drives you further in with fear. I looked at him even more confused. What do you mean? I asked him, did you guys not see me go into the freezer? I swear I heard you yelling for me once I went into the second freezer. William looked at me with worry. No, Mikey. That's the creature's way of driving you deeper into his domain, by using fear. It can only feed on you if you get close enough to where its den is, and will use any means to get you there. He paused to take a few deep breaths, then continued. I realized you were in here 5 minutes after I saw you while I was getting the mop. I cleaned that mess the kid left, and when I came and put the mop away, I saw that the broom hadn't been moved at all and the door to the walk-in cooler wasn't fully shut. He stopped again to catch his breath. Mikey, please go get help. Tell James that we went into the second freezer. I don't care if we get fired. Follow the rope that I tie to all the door handles to get out. Make it fast, Mikey. I can dash. Boom! The metal hatch below William exploded into thousands of pieces below him, and in an instant William was yanked into the depths of darkness. That lit a fire under my ass. I ran faster than I've ever had, following the rope that had laid out, heart thumping in my ears with each passing second. When I finally got back to the regular freezer, I removed the end of the rope that William tied up in the shelf post, causing the slack to go flying into back rooms, freezer doors slamming one by one in the distance, before, finally, the one in front of me slammed shut. I ran all the way out of the store and took off home and never looked back. I'm sorry, William, but there was no way in hell I was dealing with any more of that. The reason why I've come to tell about these events is more so a warning. My managers never called me after that night. In fact, the store was shut down the next day, surrounded by yellow tape, as the news claimed that the store had failed health standards so bad that it was unsafe for anyone to go in there. Over these last few months, they've been moving trucks in and out of the parking lot, before ultimately tearing down the whole store. Today it was announced on the news that the biggest grocery store chain in America has bought out the company and plans to build one of their stores in that exact spot. Story 9, I'm a free diver. There's a place in the kelp forest where the fish won't go and my friend disappeared. I don't dive kelp anymore. I still free dive. Pools, sandy bottoms, clear blue drop-offs where you can see the bottom from the surface. But not kelp, not where the light turns into broken beams, and you can't see what's behind the stalk next to your face. If you looked at my Instagram, you'd think I was lying. There's a video on there from last year. Bright morning off the central coast, flat ocean, a six-pack charter boat rocking lazily on a kelp bed. You can see me and my buddy Tom doing warm-up drops off a float, see lions looping around the hull. All very ocean therapy, vibes. There's nothing from below 15 meters in that forest. I deleted all of that. The official story is that Tom blacked out at depth and got tangled. Free diver error. Our fault. The report doesn't mention the band of dead water where the fish wouldn't go, or the thing that pulled on our float line, like it was checking what we were. It was Tom's idea to book that trip. We both finished a level 2 free diving course a month earlier down in La Jolla, passed our 30-meter dives, learned how not to die in blackout scenarios, came home with new dive watches, and an inflated sense of our own competence. Tom went all in. Sold his longboard to buy carbon fins. Started main comp divers. He followed like he was networking now. He wanted depth records and sponsor tags. I just wanted to stop feeling like my lungs were going to explode at 10 meters. Glass out there. He texted me that morning. Harbor webcams look like a lake. You working? I was off. I had my phone in one hand and a mug of coffee from the office Keurig in the other. My boss had just dropped the schedule for the next 2 weeks on my desk. Wall-to-wall shifts. If I say no, will you leave me alone? I wrote back. He sent a selfie from the dock instead of answering. Thick black 5mm, suit peeled down to his waist, hood hanging. Behind him, a faded white charter boat with Kate Lynn painted on the stern in chip blue letters, and a captain who looked like he'd been carved out of sun damage and cigarettes. Spots paid for, the caption read. You can nap on the way out. I stared at my calendar for another second. Thought about 2 weeks of fluorescent lights and stale break room air. And caved. Give me 30, I typed. Don't let the captain leave without my pretty face. The harbor was quiet when I got there. Gulls yelling over the fish processing plant. A couple of guys pushing carts of tanks down the dock. Diesel and salt in the air. The kind of morning brochures like to pretend is every morning. Kate Lynn bobbed at the slip. The captain checked our names off a clipboard, then did the safety spiel in the bored tone of someone who's done it 4 times a week for 20 years. Life jackets on the bench. O2 here. First aid kit here. He said, tapping each box with a knuckle. If you're gonna pass out, try not to do it under the boat. You guys are just breath holders, right? No tanks. Just free diving, Tom said, grinning. We brought our own float and line. We'll stay on it. The captain looked at the orange float at Tom's feet, the coil 100-foot line. The small anchor clipped to the end. He grunted. Every guy says he'll stay on the line, he said. Every season someone chases a fish and makes me call the Coast Guard. You want to screw around, do it on someone else's boat. We clear. Yes, sir, Tom said, still smiling. He always smiled when someone challenged him. It was like a reflex. We motored out of harbor, around the breakwater, and into low, gentle swell. The water outside was stupidly calm. Small rolling bumps, no whitecaps. The kind of day you talk about for months afterward. Gonna drop you boys on the outside edge of Big Bed. The captain yelled over the engine, pointing at a darker patch ahead of us. Sounder says 28 meters. Lots of bait and bass on the canopy. You'll have company. Tom practically vibrated. Dude, if the viz is even decent, this is gonna be sick, he said in my ear. You brought your slate, right? I tapped the little white plastic board, clipped to my belt. Yeah. I brought your underwater notepad. He made fun of me when I bought it. What, you gonna write poetry at 20 meters? Until he got tired of having to surface every time I wanted to tell him something. We passed over the kelp bed. From above, it looked like a thick mat of bronze coins, glossy in the morning sun. Sea lions popped their heads up and watched us go by, glistening and smug. The captain put us on the outside edge, where the kelp thin enough that you could swim between stalks without sawing your mask strap off. He killed the engine, the boat settled, and the hull started its slow, rhythmic roll. We suited up. I pulled my 5mm over my shoulders, smeared spit in my mask, checked my snorkel clip. Tom fussed with his GoPro mount, making sure the little camera on his forehead was angled just right. Record or it didn't happen, he said, tapping it. Just don't headbutt the boat, I said. Those videos are harder to monetize. He laughed, hopped to the transom, and did a clean flat-back entry into the water. I followed less gracefully. The cold slid down the back of my suit in that way it always does the first time, like someone poured ice along my spine. Then the neoprene sealed and it was bearable. We swam the float a few meters into bed and dropped the anchor weight between a cluster of kelp holdfasts, careful not to wrap the line around anything. The line hung down into the green. I put my face in the water and forgot about the boat for a second. Kelp is different from the top than it is from inside. On the surface, it's a mat. Underneath, it's a vertical forest. Thick stalks rising from the bottom in tight groups. Blades streaming out like flags and swell. Sunlight slants down between them, turning the water gold and green. 10 meters down, I could see fish already. Blacksmith, little rockfish, bright orange Garibaldi. A sea lion shot past, just a blur of smooth muscle. It was beautiful. It was exactly the kind of setting you see in freediving videos with soothing music and inspirational captions. That's the problem with a lot of horror. If you freeze frame it early, it looks like a screensaver. We started with warm-ups. Tom grabbed the line first, floated face down for a couple of minutes, slowing his breathing. Then he jackknifed it, did a clean duck dive, and started pulling himself down hand over hand, fins trailing. I watched his long black fins disappear into the kelp's lower levels. The forest swallowed him quickly. My watch ticked time on my wrist. 20 seconds. 30. 45. He came back up after maybe a minute, blew out, and did his recovery breathing. Short exhales and big inhales like we'd been taught. Clear, he said between puffs. He pulled his mask up for a second, eyes bright. Man, it's insane down there. Like a real forest. Big bait balls at 10, 15. Bass cruising through. You're gonna lose your mind. I wasn't sure if that was a phrase I wanted to hear. I tugged my mask back into place anyway. I'll go to 15, I said. Stretch my ears out. Don't move the float. He saluted. I floated face down, filling and emptying my lungs at a slow, steady rhythm. You can feel your heart rate drop if you pay attention, like someone letting off a brake pedal. One more inhale, comfortably full, not max, and I tipped forward hands sliding down the line. The water closed over my head. Sounds from the boat dulled, replaced by the small noises of my own exhale and the creak of kelp. I equalized every meter or two, pinching my nose and puffing gently until the pressure behind my sinuses eased. The light dimmed, turned greener. Around 10 meters, I passed into the busy zone. Schools of anchovy flickered between blades. A Garibaldi rushed up to my mask, turned, and flashed his orange side at me like a dare. Small rockfish hung near the stalks, their fins barely moving. I stopped around 15, one hand on the rope, and just hung there. Below me, the forest went on. Stalks thickened, closer together. The beams of light thinned. The bottom was somewhere another 10, 12 meters down from where I was, hidden in shade. And below where I hung, past maybe 20 meters, the movement stopped. Up where I was, life was everywhere. Little flicks of silver, flashes of color, shadows of larger fish pushing through the schools. Down there was nothing. No base, no perch, no crabs on the holdfasts, just kelp blades swaying in slow motion. If there had been no fish anywhere, I'd have blamed temperature or oxygen or something else we learned about in passing. But the line was sharp, as if something had drawn a horizontal cutoff, and everything with gills got the memo. The hair on my neck prickled under my hood. My lungs tapped me on the shoulder, reminding me I wasn't down there on a tank. I turned, looked up, and pulled myself back to the surface. Breaking through is usually a small relief. This time it felt like getting pulled out of a room you'd walked into by mistake. "How's it look?" Tom asked, hooking one arm over the float. "Pretty," I said, "and weird." Lots of activity up top. Nothing below 20, like a desert. He frowned behind his mask. "Like dead." "Not dead, just empty." I hesitated, then added, "Feels wrong, like it shouldn't be that sharp." He shrugged. "Thermocline, maybe. Fish hang where the food and temp line up. You want the deep zone left to us." I tugged my slate up, flipped around, and wrote, "Fish stop at 20. Nothing moves lower. Gives me a bad feeling." I handed it over. He read it, then tapped his pencil against the plastic for a second, thinking. Could be temp/O2. I'll go look closer. Stay online. He flashed me an okay sign, took a couple of big breaths, and dipped under again. I watched his fins track down the line. 5 meters. 10. 15. The schools parted around him. He passed my strange boundary and kept going into the emptiness. At around 25 meters, he let go of the line and drifted a little to the side, turning slowly like he was panning for the camera. I held the rope and saw him hang there, a dark shape in the green, a little cloud of bubbles escaping his hood and climbing toward me. He stayed longer than I liked. Tom could do 2-minute dives in class when he was focused, but this was cold water, a thick suit, current. I shifted my grip on the line, not pulling, just ready. Something moved below him. It was just at the edge of what I could see. A long, pale shape, thicker than any fish I've seen here, slid between two clusters of kelp at maybe 30 meters. I thought at first it was a trick of the light, the way shadows shift when surge moves the blades. Then it turned. Fish bend, eels bend, their whole body curves in one line. This thing's movement was segmented. One part of it seemed to pivot first, then the next, like someone turning a stack of boxes one at a time. I couldn't see ahead, just length in those strange jointed turns. My hand went automatically to the handle of the knife on my belt, making sure it was still there. The pale shape angled up a little and stopped. I had the horrible, specific sensation that it was listening, the way a dog cocks its head when it hears a sound you don't. I looked down the line for Tom. I didn't see him at first, just the kelp, just a band of nothing. Then a hand slid onto the rope from below, gloved fingers wrapping tight. His other hand followed. He started pulling himself up with powerful, calm motions. No panic. He surfaced a couple of meters from the float, blew out, and did his recovery breathing, eyes closed. "Big sand base," he said after a few breaths, laughing a little, just out of range. "And yeah, dude, that band is freaky. It's like someone drew a line where the world stops." I didn't mention what I'd seen under him. I wasn't ready to give a name out loud. Not yet. Let's maybe not hang in it. I said instead, we can stay in the busy part. He squinted at me. You good? I'm fine. I lied. I just don't want to stack deep dives on an empty stomach. Couple of shallower ones. Then I want to go annoy the captain. He snorted. You and your don't die kick. One more deep for me. You stay at 15 like a safety diver. That cool. My slate was still in my hand. I almost wrote NO in big letters and held it in his face. Instead I wrote, you stay on line. I stay above you. One more, then shallow only. He tapped the OK sign against it, then against his own chest, like he was swearing an oath. We did the next one together. We floated side by side for a minute, breathing slow. Inhale, exhale, long pauses, feeling our heart rate settle. The surface layer was cold enough along my cheeks that my lips were slightly numb. Last deep, he said, mostly out of habit. We both took a final inhale, duck dived, and grabbed a line. It feels different when two people are on the same rope. You can feel the small added tension, the tiny shifts when one of you kicks a little harder. His fins were just below me, flashing in my peripheral vision. 5 meters, 10. The kelp closed around us like pillars in a strained cathedral. Fish flared away, then drifted back in. At 18 meters, the water temperature dropped. I felt it slide into my hood, and along my jaw, a clean, sharp chill. I equalized. So did he? I could hear the faint crackle. At 22, we crossed into the empty band. The busy world of flickers and shadows ended. Below, dim green-brown stillness. We hung there for a second, both holding the rope, looking down. I don't know what he saw that I didn't. Maybe the thing moved differently for him. Maybe something passed closer. All I know is his eyes went from normal to wide behind his mask in a heartbeat, pupils big and flat. He didn't bowl. A panicked diver kicks. He just stopped, fingers going white on the line. My own heart rate spiked. Every part of me that wasn't brain wanted to twist around and look behind me. Training said don't spin around in kelp like an idiot. I didn't turn. I slid closer and wrapped my offhand around his forearm. He flinched, then looked at me. Little bubbles leaked from his nose as he exhaled more than he should have. I pointed up, exaggerated. The "we go now" sign. He hesitated longer than I liked, then nodded and started up, slow and controlled. We rose through the empty band, through the cooler water, back into the busy zone. Fish reappeared. The light brightened. Something brushed my fin. Not kelp. I know what kelp feels like. Soft, slick, a little give. This was firmer. Cooler in a different way. It slid along the blade from toe to heel, and then was gone, too deliberate to be surged. Every muscle in my body wanted to kick hard and get away from whatever that was. I forced my legs to keep their slow rhythm. Fast, sloppy kicks waste oxygen. I needed that more than I needed distance. We broke the surface and did our recovery breaths. My hand shook a little on the float. You feel that? He asked, breathy. Something big moved down there, like a log in a current. Something touched my fin. I said, throat dry, slid along it. Not kelp. Probably just a seal, he said automatically, then seemed to hear himself. There had been no seal silhouettes on that dive. I pulled up my slate, wrote with my hand cramping tight. I don't like this. We should go back to boat. He read it, looked at the boat, tiny and a little too far away from my taste, and made a face. Conditions are perfect. 1 to 2 more shallow only. Then we bail. I wanted to say no. I really did. But you don't go from refined to tripped over easily, especially when you're out there on someone else's time. Shallow, I said. Nothing below 10. Stay where we can see the hull. If anything pulls the line again, I'm out. Deal, he said. He actually stuck his hand out above water. I slapped it. We unclipped the ankle weight and swam the float a bit closer to the edge of the bed, where the kelp thinned and the surface light punched down more cleanly. I could see the underside of the Caitlin now, the ladder, the hull rolling. We did a few easy dives. 8, 10 meters, weaving in and out of the upper canopy. Anchovy schools glittered in the sunbeams. A sea lion rocketed by once, close enough that I felt the pressure wave on my suit. For a bit, I almost managed to relax. I still checked the nothing band every time I looked down. It was still there, a horizontal limit, where all the life stopped as if cut off. On the surface between drops, Tom was buzzing. "Dude, this footage is going to be insane," he said. "If I don't look like a total kook, I'm going to cut together a clip for that brand contest." "Make sure you tag Scream internally," I said. "Accurate hashtag." He laughed and ducked his face back in the water. I was floating on my back, staring at the sky, when the first big wrong thing happened. The float jerked. Now a little bob from the swell. A hard, sudden yank from below that pulled part of the buoy under and dragged a full foot toward the forest center. The rope between my hand and the float went tight enough that the nylon creaked. I rolled over fast, mask snapping back down, heart jumping into my throat. Tom had just broken the surface by the float, half a body length away. So I knew it wasn't him pulling on anything. The line dipped under my hand again, harder. The float dunked, water washing over its top. The clips on its sides rattled. Grabbed the line. I said, out of breath, even though I was on the surface. "Dude, let go if it snagged," he started. The tension vanished. The rope went slack, then slowly straightened again and the gentle surface swelled. I peered down along it. The anchor weight we'd unclipped was clipped to the float now, so there was nothing heavy on the end. The line just hung, disappearing into green. Between two stalks about 10 meters down, the light bent slightly. Something pale slid away from the rope, deeper into the kelp. I caught the jointed, segmented way it moved again before it vanished into shadow. It had been holding our line, and then decided to let go. I didn't think. I pulled the whole length up hand over hand, until the end snapped out of the water. No kelp wrapped around it. No debris. Just a bare, wet rope. "I'm done," I said. My voice sounded flat. "That's it. I'm going back to the boat." Tom opened his mouth, then shut it. For the first time since we left the harbor, he really looked at my face. "Okay," he said. He sounded like he meant it. "Okay, let me do one last pass under the canopy, and then we both go in, yeah? Just shallow. I won't even go past the first hold fast." He said it like a smoker promising to only have one more cigarette that night. "Habit, momentum. No deeper than 10, I said. "You stay where I can see you the whole time. If you chase a fish, I swear to God I'll cut your fins off." He gave me a weak grin. "You love me too much. I'll be right back." He took 2 or 3 calm breaths, duck dived, and slipped under. I kept my face in the water. I wasn't going to be the guy staring at the sky when his buddy vanished. He leveled out around 8 meters, just under the sun-speckled canopy, and swam parallel to the edge of the bed. A school of bigger fish, the kind that make people spend too much on spear guns, hung just out from him. White sea bays, probably. Thick bodies, faint stripes. He didn't have a gun with him, but instinct is instinct. He angled toward them a bit, curious. They flared away, then reformed, moving just ahead of him. He followed for a few kicks, still in that upper band. I was about to tap on a float and signal him back when the entire school snapped upward in a tight, silver column. Something pale shot through the space they'd been in. For a second, it looked like someone had fired a thick cable along the bottom of the kelp. It was that fast. One moment there was nothing. The next there was a length of pale body curling around Tom's legs. He didn't even have time to react. The creature, whatever it was, looped around him again, higher, a coil across his thighs, another around his chest. The ridge sides folded and tightened in one fluid motion. His body snapped rigid. His fins kicked once, purely reflex. A stream of bubbles blasted out from his mask and hood. He didn't have a regulator in his mouth to lose. That was the only difference between this and a tank diver's nightmare. I didn't think about it. There wasn't time. I spat my snorkel, took the biggest breath I could in a single panicked inhale, and went down. The water closed over me fast. The taste of rubber from my mouthpiece, salt, and adrenaline was all I had for a second. I narrowed everything to 3 points. The float line under my hand, the dark shape of Tom wrapped in pale coils, and the pressure in my chest. He was at maybe 9 meters. Not deep, but with something around his chest and neck, and no air. Every second counted double. The creature's body was thicker than it had looked from above. Up close, it was about as big around as my torso. The skin was a dull, clamshell white, with a faint, irregular pattern under it like veins or fibers. Along its sides, those ridges I felt earlier flexed and moved in small waves. Tom's face behind his mask was red, eyes wide and unfocused, mouth strained against the strap. One coil ran diagonally across his jaw and temple. I could see the skin under it already flushing where the ridges dug in. I grabbed that coil with one hand. It felt wrong. Not like fish, not like shark. There was give to it, but not the right kind. The ridges pressed into my glove like suckerless suction cups, tasting the neoprene. The pressure around my wrist increased. The ridges tightened. For a heartbeat, I had the very clear sensation of being measured. I yanked my knife with the other hand and drove it down across the band. The blade bit. There was resistance, then a sudden give. Dark fluid, almost black in the green water, puffed out into the space between us. The coil spasmed. The whole length of the thing flexed. The water around us shook. Kelp around us snapped upright and back. Leaves slapped against my mask and hood. A stalk somewhere near my fin cracked like a broom handle breaking. The band across Tom's chest loosened half an inch. He surged in it, trying to use the slack. Another coil shifted up, around his shoulders, tightening there instead. He was out of air. You can tell, even without words. The panic in his eyes shifted from "this hurts" to something more primal. His movements got jerky and uncoordinated. My own lungs burned. I'd taken a crap breath and then spent it fighting. CO2 alarms went off all through my body, loud and insistent. I went for another coil, lower this time, where it held his legs and the float line. The knife sank maybe halfway before it hit something tougher. I leaned on it, feeling the blade grind against cartilage or bone or something else solid. The creature's body twisted. A section near what I think was its far end flared wider. The ridges are flattened, revealing a darker patch that opened and closed once. I didn't see teeth. I saw the shape, the roundness, the flex, and the way it angled toward me. A sound rolled through me, not something I heard in my ears. A vibration, low, steady, like a big diesel engine idling against my ribs. Every instinct I had screamed run in a language older than actual words. My chest cramped, my throat spasmed. My body tried to force an inhale. If I took a breath, I died down there with him. That fact cut through everything. I let go of the knife. I grabbed Tom's shoulders instead and kicked upward, hard, using the line as much as my legs. The coil around his legs held. The one around his chest tightened again as the creature reacted to our movement, trying to maintain its grip. For one awful second, we didn't go anywhere. It was like pulling against a solid post. Then something gave. Not the creature. Tom. His hood slipped. The friction of the coil across his jaw ripped his mask strap free. The mask spun away, bumping my shoulder. His face, suddenly bare to the water, looked wrong. Eyes bloodshot, lips pale, bits of dark fluid in the corners of his mouth from where the ridges had scraped his cheek. He convulsed once more. His hand, which had been clawing at the coil, dropped. I've practiced rescuing unconscious divers in control pools in class, with instructors watching and safety divers on hand. You learn to feel a dead weight. It's a specific thing, limp and heavy. I felt that snap into him like a switch. The vibration in the water grew stronger. The ridged side of the creature brushed my thigh as it repositioned, and the line of the float slid along its body. My lungs went from "this hurts" to "we are done." Instinct beat training. For me, anyway, I let go. I wish I could say I didn't. I wish I could say I held on until my vision went black, and we both woke up on the surface being resuscitated by heroic strangers. I didn't. I pushed off his shoulder instead, aimed for the lighter water, and kicked like I've never kicked before. The kelp blurred, the empty band, the busy band. All of it went past too fast to register. My ears screamed from the ascent rate. I felt something tug at my fin once, then slip. I cleared the surface in a mess of spray and foam, half choked on my own reflex inhale. The sky was too bright. The boat was still there. The float bobbed a couple of meters from me, rope trailing limp. Tom didn't surface. "Where is he?" someone yelled from the boat. It took me a second to realize it was the captain. I couldn't answer at first. I was coughing, water and snot, and a little bit about burning my throat. Diver under. I finally managed, waving one arm. He's under. The captain hit an air horn 3 times and started yelling for the other divers to get out of the water. Someone on deck threw a life ring without thinking. It splashed near me and drifted away. I sucked air, pulled my mask up on my forehead, and rolled to look down. The kelp obscured everything. Stalks, blades, shafts of light. The nothing band. No Tom. No pale coils. The float line hung free and swaying. For a second, I thought I saw the long, pale shape again, deeper in, moving parallel to the edge of the bed. Then the boat shadow slid over us and my visibility dropped. The Coast Guard was called. The captain had to. We were still on the clock. I remember being hauled up the ladder, my suit dripping, my knees shaking hard enough that I had to sit on the deck. Someone wrapped a towel around my shoulders and kept saying, "Breathe," like I'd forgotten how. They made me lie down anyway and put oxygen on me, because that's what you do when someone comes up panicked and fast. A crewman kept asking me how deep I'd been, how long I thought I'd stayed, if I blacked out. I didn't black out. I said over and over, I left him. I left him down there. They chalked that up to shock. The other divers, tank guys who've been doing an entirely different site on the same boat, stood around in various states of half-suited and stunned. The captain paced. He wouldn't look at the water. The Coast Guard boat arrived, then another official boat with sonar. They dropped a marker buoy near where we said we'd last seen Tom. They tried to put a team down, but by then surge had picked up and the kelp had shifted. Visibility dropped below anything they considered safe. They searched until light went. They searched the next day with ROV cameras and more sonar. They found bits of kelp, rocky ledges, one of Tom's fins. Not the one I'd felt tug. That one was just gone. They didn't find him. My statement that afternoon in the harbor office was a mess. I sat in a metal chair in my half-peeled wetsuit, shivering under sweats and a loaner jacket, and told them what I remembered. The officer, a guy in a polo with a clipboard and tired eyes, wrote entanglement and possible hypoxia, and Buddy attempted rescue on his form. He circled no tank, underlined it twice. He asked me 3 times if Tom had been chasing a fish. "Yes," I finally said. "Kind of." He followed a school. He was still shallow. Something grabbed him. "Something," he repeated, pen hovering. "Like kelp? Like an animal." He paused. "What kind of animal?" I could have said sea lion. I could have said shark. Those would have slotted neatly into his paperwork. "I don't know," I said. "Long, pale. No fins I could see. Coiled around him. Ridges along the side." It squeezed. He looked at me for a long second. His expression didn't change, but I could feel the quiet click of him moving my account from useful to compromise. "We don't have anything like that in the local species database," he said finally. "Sounds like you might have been disoriented. It happens when you're on breath hold and working hard." I know what disorientation feels like. I snapped. "I did your stupid class." This wasn't that. He wrote reported unknown animal on his form without comment. Tom's GoPro was still on his head when the coil was wrapped around his face. I saw it. I remember my fingers brushing him out when the mask slipped. They didn't find that either. The story the news ran the next day was the one you'd expect. Local freediver missing OFF Morro Bay. The headline said under a photo of Tom from his own social feed. Mask on his forehead. Grin wide. Subhead about danger of breath hold diving without proper safety protocols. They called me his instructor-trained buddy and said I attempted rescue but was forced to surface. They quoted the Coast Guard about shallow water blackout, about how quickly a diver can lose consciousness at depth. No one printed the part where I said something had wrapped around him. The captain didn't go back to that bed for the rest of the season. I know, because I kept checking his charter calendar and asking around. He'd anchor at other spots, talk up other reefs. If anyone asked about the kelp forest, he'd say conditions weren't good that week. When people in the free-diving group chats brought the incident up, they framed it like the article had. Blackout. Overconfidence. Probably got hung up and couldn't clear his snorkel. The usual cautionary story phrases. I didn't correct them. It would have turned into a fight I didn't have the energy for. One guy messaged me privately. Another local diver I barely knew in person. Hey man, he wrote. I was out at different kelp bed last month. Not same site, but same coast. Not sure if it helps, but I saw that thing you wrote about the fish line, where everything stops. We had that too. No fish below maybe 18M. My buddy thought it was temp. Didn't feel like that. I asked him if anything touched his line. If anyone didn't come back up, he said no. They bailed when it fell off. Good, didn't like it, he wrote. Figured we'd save the PR for a day I'm less attached to. I didn't sleep that night. Every time the fridge compressor kicked in, that low hum made me sit up and stare into the dark, listening for the sound of something sliding along the outside wall. After a week of that, I unplugged the fridge one night, just to prove to myself the sound wasn't in the house. It wasn't. I still heard it anyway, low in my chest, like an after image. There's not really a neat lesson here. I could say don't free dive alone, or always stay on the line, or respect your depth limits. All of that is true, and you should do it. But we were together. We had a line. We stayed within our training, on paper. We did everything you're supposed to put in a brochure. Something out there still found us. If you dive kelp, pay attention to what the life around you is doing. Fish know more than you do. If every bait school and bay stops at the same depth for no obvious reason, ask yourself why. If your float line gets pulled from below hard enough to dunk the buoy, and the captain swears the anchor's up, don't tell yourself it's just surge. And if your buddy takes a slate and writes, I don't like this, / we should go back to the boat, listen to him. Even if you think the viz is too good a waste. Sometimes the thing you're worried about isn't hypoxia or entanglement. Sometimes it's something that already learned where you have to breathe and is just waiting at the edge of that quiet, testing how hard it has to pull to see what you'll do. Story 10. After my surgery, I can't stand to look at my family anymore. I'm writing this from my laptop, wedged in my closet, with the door barricaded by my desk and dresser. I can't hear them outside my bedroom door. Their voices are so calm, so loving, but there are other sounds, too. And those are the sounds that are keeping me in here. It all started 3 months ago. My whole life has been a literal blur. I was born with astigmatism, so bad the optometrist used a joke. I saw the world in permanent soft focus. I couldn't find my glasses on a nightstand without first fumbling for them, like a blind man. Contacts were a daily, irritating ritual. I was 24, had a decent job, and I finally saved up enough. LASIK was my ticket to a new life, a clear life. The consultation was sterile and reassuring. The doctor was a sharp, older man with an intense, almost predatory focus. He had this way of looking at you, like he was seeing more than just the surface of your eyes. He talked about refractive errors and corneal flaps, using a calm, authoritative tone that washed away any of my lingering anxieties. He mentioned a new, slightly experimental technique he was pioneering. He said it was more precise, offering a level of clarity that was unprecedented. He claimed it could correct for atmospheric distortions and even light-level fluctuations that standard procedures couldn't touch. I was sold. I wanted the best. I wanted to see everything. God, what a fool I was. The surgery itself was as bizarre and impersonal as you'd expect. The smell of antiseptic, the cold metal of the head brace, the Valium they gave me making my limbs feel like they belonged to someone else. I remember the pressure on my eyeball, The smell of burning that they tell you is just a laser, and the doctor's calm voice narrating the whole thing. A perfect flap. Now we're reshaping. Just a few more seconds. Then darkness, followed by the soft application of bandages and shields over my eyes. The recovery was the hardest part. 2 weeks of total darkness. I was completely dependent on my family. My mom, my dad, my younger sister. They were amazing. They led me around the house by the arm. Made sure I didn't bump into anything. My mom would cook all my favorite meals. The smell of her stew or roasted chicken filling the house. She'd sit with me, spoon-feeding me so I wouldn't make a mess. Her voice was a constant, soothing presence. Just a little more, sweetie. You need to keep your strength up. My dad would read to me for hours. Sports pages, fantasy novels, anything to pass the time. His deep, rumbling voice was a comfort in the black void my world had become. My sister would change the music, put on podcasts, and just sit with me, her presence a silent reassurance. They were the perfect, loving family, and I was consumed with a profound sense of gratitude. I couldn't wait to see their faces again, really see them with my new, perfect eyes. The day the bandages came off was supposed to be a celebration. We all went to the clinic together. The nurse was gentle as she snipped the tape and slowly unwound the gauze. For a moment, with the bandages gone but my eyes still closed, I felt a tremor of pure, unadulterated excitement. Okay, the nurse said softly. Open them slowly. The light will be very bright at first. I did as she said. I squeezed my eyelids, then let them flutter open. The first thing I noticed was the sharpness. It was violent. Every single texture in the room leaped out at me. The microscopic pits in the acoustic tile ceiling. The individual fibers in the nurse's blue scrubs. The tiny, almost invisible cracks in the linoleum floor. It was overwhelming, a tidal wave of visual information that made my brain ache. The doctor had said it would be like this. Hypersensitivity. He said it would calm down. I blinked, trying to focus. The nurse was smiling at me. She looked normal, just a woman in her 40s with kind eyes and a slightly tired smile. Then I turned to my family, and my world broke. It's hard to describe what I saw, because my mind refused to accept it for the first few seconds. It was like a cognitive blind spot, a visual glitch. My mom was smiling, her mouth moving, saying my name, but her face wasn't just her face. Fused to her jawline, wrapping up and around her left cheek, was something else. It was a pulsating sack of mottled, grayish-pink flesh, veined with sickly purple lines. 2 thin, whip-like tendrils, no thicker than a worm, were coiled around her lower lip, and as she spoke, they twitched and adjusted, seeming to pull her lips into the shape of a smile. Her own skin seemed stretched and thin where it met this growth. I tore my eyes away, my heart hammering against my ribs, and looked at my dad. He was clapping me on the shoulder, his face beaming with pride, but from his chest, blooming out from under his collared shirt, was a larger, more complex structure. It was a fleshy, fungal-looking mass that seemed to have burrowed into his sternum. It was ribbed, almost like a grotesque seashell, and it glistened with a thin sheen of moisture. A thick, tube-like appendage snaked up from it, disappearing under his chin and into his mouth. He wasn't speaking. The sounds were coming from him, but the fleshy tube was vibrating with the words. I felt the bile rise in my throat. I looked at my sister. She was the worst. A shimmering, almost translucent thing was draped over her head and shoulders like a living shawl. It was featureless, save for a series of pulsating bladders that ran down her spine. Its tendrils were woven into her hair, and 2 larger, thicker ones were plugged directly into the corners of her mouth, stretching her lips into a permanent, placid grin. What do you think? My mom's voice cooed, but the thing on her face seemed to pulse in time with her words. Can you see us clearly? I couldn't breathe. I couldn't speak. I just stared, my new, perfect eyes taking in every single horrifying detail. The way the things moved in symbiosis with them. The way their own bodies seemed almost secondary. He's in shock. My dad's voice rumbled, the tube on his chest vibrating. It's a lot to take in all at once. I must have passed out, or at least blacked out, because the next thing I remember is being in the car on the way home. my head against the cool glass of the window. I kept my eyes closed. I told them the light was just too much. My head was killing me. They were so understanding. They bought it completely. The next few weeks were a living nightmare. I pretended my eyes were still adjusting, that I had a constant migraine. I spent as much time as I could in my room, in the dark, but I couldn't hide forever. I had to eat. The first time my mom brought me a tray of food, I almost screamed. It was her famous beef stew, the one I had loved my whole life. The smell was the same. Rich, savory, a little bit of rosemary. But what I saw on the plate was not stew. It was a bowl of thick, dark red, almost black sludge. It moved. It pulsed with a slow, rhythmic beat, like a living organ. Floating in the gruel were small, white, maggot-like things, writhing slowly. "Eat up," she said, her voice warm, while the parasite on her cheek quivered with anticipation. "You need your strength." I stared at the bowl, then at her. I watched as one of the tendrils on her face dipped into the bowl, scooped up a dollop of the writhing sludge, and pushed it into her mouth. She chewed, swallowed, and smiled at me. I threw up in the bathroom for 20 minutes. I learned to cope. I'd take the food to my room, flush it down the toilet, and claim I'd eaten it. I lived on protein bars and bottled water I'd smuggled into my room and hidden. But the water, even the water was wrong. When they poured me a glass from the tap, it wasn't clear. It was a viscous, faintly reddish liquid, like heavily diluted blood. Yet they drank it down like it was nothing. They'd pour a glass, and the things attached to them would dip their own spiny little appendages into the glass first, before letting their host drink. The scariest part was how normal everything else was. I'd sneak out of the house sometimes. I'd walk down the street, and everyone looked normal. The mailman, the kids playing in the park, the woman jogging with her dog. They were all just people. It was only my family. Was I going insane? Was this some kind of rare, localized hallucination brought on by the surgery? A stroke? A brain tumor? I started watching them. Really watching them. I noticed that when they thought I wasn't looking, their movements became less human. My dad would sit in his armchair, and the fungal thing on his chest would periodically unfurl, revealing a dark, gaping orifice that would let out a low, guttural click. My sister would sometimes stand perfectly still for hours, staring at a wall, while the translucent thing on her back rippled and shimmered, as if communicating with something I couldn't see. Then I realized my family never actually chewed. Their jaws moved, but it was the appendages of the thing attached to them that did the work, shoving the pulsating gruel into their mouths, where it was absorbed, not swallowed. The isolation was crushing me. I was terrified of my own family. Their loving touches felt like the probing of an alien species. Their kind words were a horrifying mimicry. I had to get back to the doctor. He had to know what was happening. He had done this to me. He had to fix it. I made an appointment under the guise of a post-op checkup. My mom offered to drive me. I made an excuse about wanting to take the bus, to feel independent again. The look she gave me, it wasn't her look. Her eyes were placid. But the thing on her cheek pulsed once. Slowly, a gesture what felt like suspicion. The hospital was a beacon of normalcy. The receptionist, the patients in the waiting room, the other doctors, they were all human, unadorned. I felt a surge of relief, so powerful, it almost made me cry. I wasn't crazy. The world was normal. Something was just profoundly, existentially wrong inside my own home. When I got to the ophthalmology department, I asked for the doctor who had performed my surgery. The receptionist, a young woman who looked bored, tapped at her keyboard for a moment. "I'm sorry," she said without looking up. "He's no longer with the hospital." My blood ran cold. What do you mean? I just saw him a few weeks ago." "He resigned," she said, finally looking at me with a hint of annoyance. "Took an extended, indefinite leave of absence. We were told he left the country." "Left the country? Where did he go? Is there any way to contact him? It's an emergency." My voice was rising, laced with a panic I couldn't control. "Sir, I don't have that information. We can schedule you with another doctor if you're having an issue." An issue? That was a really big understatement of what happens with me. I stumbled back from the desk, my mind reeling. He was gone. My only link to what had happened, my only hope for a solution, had vanished. I was alone with this. I was about to leave defeated when an older nurse who was tidying up a pamphlet rack nearby caught my eye. She gave me a quick, almost imperceptible nod towards a nearby corridor. I hesitated, then followed her. She ducked into an empty exam room and held the door for me. "You were one of his," she whispered as a statement. Her eyes were full of a strange mixture of pity and fear, the special clarity ones. I just nodded, unable to speak. "He left in a hurry," she said, her voice low and rushed. "Packed up his office overnight. Said he was going somewhere remote. He was always a strange man. Brilliant, but strange. Talked about filters. Veils." She looked over her shoulder down the empty hall. "He left this with me. He said if anyone came back, anyone who saw things differently, I should give it to them." She pressed a small, folded piece of paper into my hand. It was a phone number, just 10 digits, written in a spidery, hurried script. "I don't know what it is," she said, already backing out of the room. "And you didn't get it from me. Good luck." She was gone before I could even thank her. I ran out of the hospital and didn't stop until I was at a payphone several blocks away. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely punch in numbers. It rang once, twice, a third time. I was about to hang up when a voice answered. It was him. His voice was strained, crackly, like the connection was bad, but it was unmistakably the doctor. "Who is this?" he demanded, his tone sharp with paranoia. "It's me," I stammered, not even using my name. "The LASIK, a few weeks ago, the new procedure." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. I could hear the sound of wind and something else, a faint, rhythmic clicking. "Ah," he finally said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "So it worked." I wasn't sure. "The clarity, you're seeing it, aren't you?" "Seeing what?" I nearly screamed into the receiver. "What did you do to me?" "My family, there are things on them. Monsters." "Not monsters," he corrected, his voice tinged with a terrifying mix of academic curiosity and awe. "Passengers. Symbiotes. They've been with us for millennia, woven into our very fabric. We are just their cattle." I leaned against the grimy glass of the phone booth, my legs threatening to give out. "What are you talking about? I don't understand." "The human eye is a marvel," he began, launching into a lecture as if we were back in his sterile office. "But it's not perfect. It evolved not just to see, but also not to see. From the moment we are born, there's a biological filter in place, a complex series of photoreceptors and neural inhibitors that renders them invisible to us. It's a veil, a defense mechanism developed over thousands of years for their protection. If we could see them, we would fight them. Their survival depends on their secrecy." My mind was struggling to catch up, to process the sheer insanity of what he was saying. "Them? Who are they?" "I don't know their name for themselves," he said, a note of frustration in his voice. "Parasites is the closest word we have, but it's not quite right. It's a deeper bond than that. They nourish us. They protect us from certain illnesses. They keep their hosts docile. Content. In return, they get to live. They experience the world through us. And the food," I whispered, thinking of the pulsating gruel. "The water. Their sustenance, not ours," he confirmed. "A slurry of organic matter, and their own larval forms, which they cultivate. They process it and pass the nutrients on to the human host. It's a perfectly efficient, closed system, as long as you can't see it." The pieces were slamming into place, forming a picture of such profound horror that I felt my sanity fraying at the edges. "You did this on purpose. The surgery. It was a hypothesis," he snapped, his voice rising with a manic energy. "I've spent my life studying the eye, its limitations. I saw anomalies, patterns that made no sense. I came to believe we weren't alone, that the truth was right in front of us, just filtered out. I theorized that I could bypass the filter, I could surgically remove the veil, but the real challenge is finding them, as it seems they do not live with all humans. I have doubted myself for so long, but you were my proof. You have to change it back. I pleaded, tears streaming down my face. I can't live like this. Please, you have to fix me. The line was silent for a moment, save for the wind and the strange clicking. When he spoke again, his voice was heavy with a terrible finality. I can't, he said softly. I don't know how. I only ever learned how to open the door. I never figured out how to close it. That's why I ran. They know about me. The ones who aren't bonded. The free-roaming ones, they can sense me. And now they will sense you too. He paused. Listen to me very carefully. The ones attached to your family. They are realizing you can see them. Their primary directive is to protect the host and preserve the secret. They will see you as a flaw, and they will try to fix you. Do not let them touch you. Do not eat or drink anything they give you. And for God's sake, do not let them near your eyes. The line went dead. I stood there for a long time, the dead receiver pressing my ear. Fix me. The word echoed in the hollow space where my hope used to be. When I got home, the atmosphere had changed. The pretense of normalcy was gone. They were all sitting in the living room, waiting for me. My mom, my dad, my sister. They all turned to look at me as I walked in, their movements perfectly synchronized. Their faces were expressions of calm, loving concern, but their passengers were agitated. The thing on my mom's cheek was pulsing rapidly. The fungal mass on my dad's chest was flared, its central orifice slightly open. My sister's translucent parasite was shimmering, its color shifting from clear to a milky, opaque white. Honey, you were gone a long time, my mom said, her voice smooth as silk. We were worried. I just needed some air, I said, my voice shaking. I started to back away towards the stairs. Your eyes look strained. My dad rumbled, standing up. The tube on his chest seemed to swell. You're not adjusting well. The doctor called while you were out. He said he forgot to give you these. He held up a small, clear bottle with a dropper. An eyedropper. He said the doctor's name. My doctor, the one who was supposedly in another country. My mom took the bottle from him and approached me. He said, these are special drops. Much stronger. They'll help with the sensitivity. They'll make everything easier to look at. She unscrewed the cap. As she did, I saw it. The milky white fluid in the bottle wasn't medicine. I watched as a thin, viscous glob of the same substance secreted from a tiny pore on the parasite clinging to her face, dripping down her cheek. She was trying to get me to put a piece of it in my eye, to blind me again. No, I whispered, backing up the stairs. No, stay away from me. Their smiles didn't falter, but their eyes went cold and glassy. Don't be difficult, son, my dad said, starting up the stairs after me, my mom and sister following close behind. We just want to help you. We love you, my sister chimed in, her voice a flat monotone. The parasite on her head rippled, and two new, smaller tendrils unfurled from near her temples, tipped with sharp-looking barbs. I turned and sprinted to my room, slamming the door and locking it just as they reached the top of the stairs. I heard the doorknob jiggle, then a soft, polite knock. Sweetie? Open the door, my mom's voice called. I scrambled to push my desk, my dresser, anything heavy, in front of the door. The wood groaned under the weight. They tried for another hour, their voices never changing from that placid, loving tone. They offered me food, a special bowl of stew, they said, full of nutrients to help my eyes heal. I imagined the writhing larvae inside, designed to grow in my gut and rebuild the veil from the inside out. I refused. Then the knocking stopped. For a while there was silence. I thought, prayed, that they had given up. But then the new sound began. Underneath the floorboards and through the door, I can hear them. The soft, wet thud of my father's host body pressing against the door. But it's not a human sound. It's the sound of the hard, fungal shell on his chest bumping against the wood. And the clicking, a low, constant chittering sound. It's the sound of their real voices. The parasites communicated with each other. A series of sharp, wet clicks and low, guttural pops. I even felt as hungry. My mom just started talking again. Her voice is as sweet as ever, dripping with honeyed concern. Honey, please come out. We just want to make you better. We just want to help you see things the right way again. But as she speaks, I can hear it right on the other side of the door. The frantic, eager clicking of the thing that wears her face. They were behind the door, just waiting. They know I have to come out eventually. I'm running out of water, and I am so thirsty. But I will not drink their blood-red water. I will not eat their writhing food. And I will not let them put their filth in my new, horribly perfect eyes. I can see everything now, and it is hell.